Welcome to Information Radio on CBC Radio 1. I'm Emily Brass, in this week for Marcy Marcusa. With me are Pat Kanuga, our show director, our studio technician, Abby Adeyemi, and Travis Peterson, our producer of the CBC Manitoba YouTube channel. And also in the studio today is Matt Humphrey with a look at the CBC News headlines.
Good morning. Lots in the news this morning. Christmas is a little different this year for many Ukrainian Orthodox Christians. We're hearing from people in Winnipeg after Christmas in Ukraine was officially moved from January 7th to December 25th, a change of calendars. And it's part of an effort to move away from Russian heritage, the president says. Now people here are dealing with that transition. We'll hear more about it and many other stories at the bottom of the hour.
Thank you, Matt.
Back soon.
That's CBC's Matt Humphrey from the CBC Newsroom. Well, here's what's coming up on the show today. The United States is standing firmly behind Israel, but this week's vote at the United Nations General Assembly supporting a ceasefire shows that concern and criticism is growing in some parts of the world. We'll talk to a journalist who was based in the Middle East for many years about the impact on international relations going forward. Telling kids to put their phones away and go play in the snow is easier said than done. We'll get some tips on how to make sure screen time doesn't take over your holidays. And for those who celebrate, are you ready for Christmas? And do you have your perfect tree? We want to know what Winnipeggers prefer, real or fake? Which tree is better? We'll find out more coming up soon. Quick look at the forecast for today. Sunny and mild, going up to a high of 20. Breezy this morning and then easing up a little in the afternoon. Tonight, mainly clear, going down to a -6. Tomorrow, a mix of sun and clouds. Breezy going up to +1. For Saturday, a mix of sun and cloud, high -7. On Sunday, a mix of sun and clouds with a high of -3. And looking ahead to next week, mild temperatures continuing. I mean, at least mild for Winnipeg anyway. Mainly sunny on Monday with a high of -4. And for Tuesday, a mix of sun and clouds with a high of -3. You're listening to CBC Radio 1, 89.3 FM in Winnipeg. This is Information Radio, and we will be back very soon after World Report.
Q with Tom Power.
Kurt Russell is one of the biggest action stars of the 80s and 90s.
Call me Snake.
And his son Wyatt is following in his footsteps.
I understand that!
They'll both be here to tell you about working together and how their background in pro sports helped them become better actors. That's coming up on Q, followed by Commotion with Elamin Abdelmahmoud on CBC Radio 1, the CBC Listen app, and everywhere you get your podcasts.
World Report. Good morning from CBC News. I'm Marcia Young. U.S. National Security Advisor Jake Sullivan is expected to urge Israel's military to alter its tactics in Gaza. He is in Tel Aviv on a 2-day visit. Overnight, aerial attacks killed at least 19 people. That is according to the Hamas-run health ministry. This resident of Khan Yunis says the whole area has been destroyed. He says, they say there are safe places, but there is not an area in Gaza that is away from the bombing. Israel's bombing campaign is expected to be high on Sullivan's agenda. One top U.S. official says these are going to be extremely serious conversations. My co-host John Northcott joins me now with more. And John, what is the White House National Security Advisor trying to do?
Marcia, amid rising tensions between the U.S. president and the Israeli prime minister, Jake Sullivan is trying to send a message while striking a diplomatic balance. He'll be meeting with Benjamin Netanyahu and his war cabinet. Sullivan's message coming from the U.S. president that Israel has to be more precise as it continues its intense bombing of Gaza. Joe Biden has described that bombing as, in his words, indiscriminate, with half of the air-to-ground attacks carried out so far described as unguided. The U.S. wants Israel to be more, quote, surgical in its strikes. Israel, on the other hand, insists its intent has always been to limit civilian casualties. As the war against Hamas continues, 9 Israeli soldiers were killed in an ambush in northern Gaza. Gazan health officials are now putting the number of Palestinian dead at more than 18,000.
Israel was not Sullivan's first stop in the Middle East. What can you tell us about his visit to Saudi Arabia?
He met with Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman, MBS as he's known. The Saudis could potentially play a key role in the longer-term peace in the region, including a possible two-state solution. The U.S. also worried about more immediate concerns, including security in the region. This as attacks continue against international shipping by Houthi rebels based in Yemen.
Thank you, John.
Thanks, Marcia.
The CBC's John Northcott in Toronto. A First Nation in Eastern Ontario has declared a state of emergency. Pikwaknikon is struggling to cope with an opioid crisis. The community is about 150 kilometers west of Ottawa. As Nicole Williams reports, officials say the drug-related deaths there are higher than ever this year.
They are my people. And when they hurt, I hurt.
Michael Dustin Commando is seeing firsthand what opioid addiction is doing to his community. As a member of the Algonquins of Pikwaknikon First Nation of just 500 people located in the Ottawa Valley, he says everyone knows each other and are connected to the people who've died from overdosing, adding to the devastation.
I do have family that has drug addictions and I see no change of them getting better.
Officials say the frequency of overdoses and deaths is growing. Before 2020, there were 5 drug-related deaths on average per year. This year, 12 people have died. Those who work at the Pikwaknikon Health Centre say they're responding to at least 3 overdoses a week. Community members have been calling for urgent action, and council responded by declaring a state of emergency in November. Greg Sarzan is chief.
And it's reached a point where the community has said, well, enough is enough. We need to do something about this.
In declaring a state of emergency, Pikwaknikon is able to access government funding for addictions programming and partnerships with provincial and federal agencies to develop an action plan, as well as more police. Sarzan says the state of emergency will remain in place for as long as necessary. Nicole Williams, CBC News, Pikwaknikon First Nation, Ontario.
Ukraine is at the top of the agenda for European Union leaders. Their summit of the year has started in Brussels. A multi-billion-dollar aid package is on the line, and so is Ukraine's EU membership. Members need to unanimously agree on adding a new member. But as Abby Kodasan reports, one country still will not budge.
Hungarian Prime Minister Viktor Orban has gone against the European Union tide before. And so as he arrived in Brussels this morning, he did not mask his stance on Ukraine's hopes to join the bloc, arguing Kyiv has not met 3 of the 7 preconditions set by the EU.
In my estimation, even more, but even 3 is enough to say that, guys, if you haven't fulfilled the preconditions, there is no chance to start to negotiate.
Some argue Orban is holding out for more EU funding. Others point out he's furious about what he calls poor treatment of the Hungarian minority in Ukraine.
Hungary does not connect any Hungarian issue to any Ukrainian or other issue. It's not our style.
All the other EU states back the start of accession talks. Many see growing the bloc as critical to security. Recent cajoling by French President Emmanuel Macron, European Council President Charles Michel, and even Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky could not change Orban's mind.
It's definitely a bad signal.
Estonian Prime Minister Kaja Kallas acknowledged membership talks are rarely quick.
We will try again, so try to convince, try to negotiate, and so not ready to give up yet.
The EU is also looking at providing a new €50 billion package to Kyiv. Orban, a Kremlin-friendly leader, opposes that too. If this 2-day summit fails, they could reconvene in January or March. But time is something Ukraine can't afford to lose. Abby Kodasan, CBC News, Berlin.
Russian President Vladimir Putin says he has no intention of stopping the war in Ukraine anytime soon. Putin held his year-end news conference this morning. Here's part of what he said with English translation.
The peace will come when we reach our goals that you have mentioned, and coming back to the goals, they remain unchanged. I will remind you, it means denazification, demilitarization of Ukraine and its neutral status.
That neutral status he mentioned refers to Ukraine not joining NATO. And the denazification refers to Russian allegations that Kiev is heavily influenced by radical nationalist and neo-Nazi groups. Putin went on to say he's hoping for an agreement for a possible prisoner swap with the United States. It would involve Canadian-born former U.S. Marine Paul Whelan and Wall Street Journal reporter Evan Gershkovich. A Russian court ruled earlier today Gershkovich must remain in jail until January 30th for his pretrial detention. Gershkovich was arrested last March on charges of espionage. He denies the charges. Pope Francis wants to see an international treaty on AI. Francis says it would ensure artificial intelligence is developed and used ethically. The Pope is concerned the technology will lack values of compassion, mercy, and forgiveness, and that puts humans at risk. The Pope's comments are part of his annual message for the World Day of Peace. The Catholic Church celebrates the day each January 1, but the Vatican released the text of the message earlier today. This comes just days after the EU secured initial approval on the world's first comprehensive AI rules. Residents of two small Quebec towns are preparing to spend the holidays away from home. Earlier this month, more than 2,000 people had to leave their communities. A nearby dike was at risk of bursting. As Sarah Levitt tells us, it is still not clear when the evacuees will be able to return.
We've put everything we have in this house. My husband built it himself.
Sitting in her hotel room, Arlene Desmarais-Ouellette can't help but think of the worst-case scenario. She and her husband have been away from home for almost 2 weeks, forced out by an emergency preventative evacuation. An alert was sent out to residents on December 3rd after a nearby dike showed signs of erosion following a routine inspection.
There's a lot of uncertainty, and I think sometimes they say no news is good news. I'm not sure about that one this time.
The Morier Dike holds back the Kiamika Reservoir filled with billions of liters of water. The towns of Lac des Écourses and Chute Saint-Philippe were immediately evacuated. Martin Ferland is an engineer specializing in dikes with Environment Quebec.
Depuis 2 semaines, on a commencé à abaisser.
He says since the inspection, they've been working non-stop to fix the issue. Authorities say the more than 2,000 residents won't be back home before at least Sunday, but
I'm not optimistic. I'm hopeful, but I'm not optimistic.
Many are certain it will be longer, and they'll spend the holidays as evacuees. Sarah Levitt, CBC News, Lac des Écourses, Quebec.
And that is the latest national and international news from World Report. News anytime at cbcnews.ca. I'm Marcia Young.
CBC Radio 1, 89.3 FM in Winnipeg, worldwide on our CBC Manitoba YouTube channel and the CBC Listen app. I'm Emily Brass, filling in this week for Marcy Marcusa. Here's what's coming up on the show. We'll talk to journalist Rami Kourni about the ongoing war in Gaza and support for a humanitarian ceasefire. We'll discuss how nations around the world are reacting to the bombardment of the territory and the growing number of casualties. We'll also get some expert advice on what parents might want to consider when it comes to screen time over the holidays. But first, Christmas is almost here, and as folks get ready for the holidays, we want to know if people are stringing up garland on a real tree or a fake one. All that and more still to come on Information Radio. 11 minutes after 6 o'clock, time for news headlines with Matt Humphrey.
Good morning. The Manitoba government says measures are being taken to stop the provincial deficit rising further, but those measures are being balanced with an effort to fulfill NDP campaign promises. We'll hear more about that at the bottom of the hour. And if you're feeling the holiday cheer, the Salvation Army is hoping you might volunteer this season. The organization's Kettle campaign has only raised about a quarter of its goal. With only a week and a half to go, it's looking for more volunteers to ring collection bells. We'll hear more about that as well.
You know, I've noticed that, Matt, actually. I'm not seeing the kettles like usual.
A lack
I was
of bells.
looking around like, where are they?
Yeah, week and a half to go.
Okay.
Yeah, so if you're feeling so inclined.
Yeah, there you go. Thank you, Matt.
Back soon.
That's CBC's Matt Humphrey. And joining us now in the studio is our show director, Pat Canugo.
Hi, good morning. How are you?
Good morning. I'm doing pretty well.
Good. I'm going to give the traffic line here, 788-3093. If you see anything, stalls, crashes, train delays, lights out, anything like that. Speaking of lights out, our friend Abby Adiemi was driving in this morning, and at 4:30, the lights were flashing red in all directions at Broadway by the Ledge. So Memorial Boulevard and, Broadway and Osborne, where it becomes Memorial, that whole area. So that could still be happening. I'm not sure if light crews get dispatched at 4 in the morning, but if you can update on me, that would be great at 788-3093. I'm looking at satellite images right now, and Abby's smiling because the entire two-thirds of the bottom two-thirds of the province are clear, and Abby was up all night looking at...
No, Pat, I came in this morning and I was sounding like a freak because I asked everybody, I'm like, did you see it? Did you look up? And I'm like, and Emily was like, nope. And
a UFO or?
I'm like, no, because the skies were so clear, like last night up until this morning. First, it was termed the king of meteor showers. It happened last night. A lot of people were actually focused on looking for the northern lights. So most people were looking north. Meanwhile, far east, if you look far east, it was like coming like, when you're having the little grain of ice hitting your car, that was happening far east. But a lot of people missed that last night. But the good thing is it's still going to happen till the end of the week. So you might catch it today or tomorrow, but you need to look way, way, way up. But the Northern Lights last night was so beautiful.
Sam is busy fiddling with my car keys. I don't even look up.
Yeah,
okay, remember, tomorrow morning, look up when you go to work.
I know Pat came in and I'm like, did you look up? He's like, no, I was fiddling with my keys. Anyway, currently in Winnipeg, we are starting, Winnipeg, you're waking up to a sunny skies with a gentle southeast breeze. The current temperature of the Fox is sitting at 0 degrees. And today, we're looking at, it's going to be bright with plenty of sunrise and sunshine in the card, and it's a mild day according to Pat. It's going to be a very, very mild day. We are going to be heading to a high of +4. Okay, but don't be fooled by that number. The breeze will definitely come with it. Winnipeg, that's your snapshot for now. If you see anything in traffic and you want us to know about it, feel free to let us know. 788-3093. Currently in Winnipeg, we are at 0.
Coming up on 6:15, you're listening to Information Radio on CBC Radio 1. I'm Emily Brass. Well, Christmas is now less than 2 weeks away, and some Manitobans are looking for that perfect tree. Manitoba's forestry branch says it's selling more $10 permits than ever to legally chop down trees, suggesting people these days prefer real over fake. We asked Winnipeggers what they prefer. Here's CBC's Jim Agapito talking to shoppers at CF Polo Park.
Madison Hopkins.
Okay, Madison, in my hand I have a fake Christmas tree and a real one.
Okay.
Which one do you prefer?
I prefer the fake one just because I have dogs and they'll eat it. The real one.
If you didn't have dogs, would you have a real one?
Probably not, because they can bring bugs into your house and I think they're a mess.
Nathan Paul. A fake one because the pine needles probably get everywhere.
Donna Chisholmore. A real Christmas tree. Why? The smell, and it's real. It's not going to be real Christmas if it's not a real Christmas tree. I just like the outdoor smell of a Christmas tree.
Daniel Cruz. I think I'm gonna go with the real one. I don't know, it just feels more authentic, it's just nicer to have a real one in your home. I mean, it's good to have a fake one if you want to get rid of it every year, but nothing beats a real Christmas tree.
Samuel Verweinering, a real Christmas tree.
Do you have a Christmas tree set up right now?
Yeah.
Okay. Is there a specific theme you guys have?
No.
No,
we just collect things from over the year and put them on. We have ornaments from when I was a kid, things that I made and my sister made, and stuff that my mom collected over the years.
Okay, everyone has a favorite one. What's a special one that you have?
We have one of my dog that passed away when I was in grade 9, and that one's my favorite. Probably.
What was your dog's name?
Lucy.
With that being said, do you have a Christmas tree set up right now?
Yes.
Does it have a specific theme right now?
Christmas theme, I guess. You know, the whole 9 yards, the ornaments, the streamers, the candy canes. We have these red ones. They're red ornament balls.
Do you have a real one set up in your home?
I absolutely do not.
That's
why I want one.
Do you have a fake one set up?
Yeah, we.
Okay, tell me about ornaments. What is on your tree?
I like the color white, so anything like white ribbons, white, what do you call those little balls, I guess? A little bit of white, so it kind of matches the season.
Different colors, ornaments for the kids, garland, tinsel, Christmas lights. Yeah, pretty near anything that you can put on a Christmas tree. And a Christmas star or an angel.
Okay, why are those important to you?
Because the one that we have for the angel is been in my husband's family for years. And that's the one that we use.
And you also just said that it's got to be a real one. So why does it not feel like Christmas unless you have a real tree?
It smells the whole house up.
Real? Could you describe for me what your tree looks like right now?
Just random ornaments we've got from over the years.
Do you have a special ornament that you have on the tree?
I don't have a special one, but I have a favorite. It's a lobster ornament. It looks like a cartoonish, stuffed animal-looking lobster with black eyes.
How long have you had it for?
Around 2 years, maybe.
Are you excited about the holidays and Christmas?
Yes.
How are you going to spend it?
Spending time with my family.
Is there any chance that you would want to ever have a real Christmas tree?
No, just a plastic one.
That was CBC's Jim Agapito asking Winnipeggers if they prefer a real or a fake Christmas tree. And if you're watching us on our YouTube channel, you can probably see our little tree, or on television. I know people are out there watching us there too. And it's kind of cool. It's this fiber optic tree that Abby brought in. And some of our ornaments include an astronaut, a dinosaur, a soccer ball, headphones, and then everyone's favorite, a vintage 66 Pontiac GTO convertible. And if you know our studio crew, you can probably guess who put that up. It was Pat Kanuga.
Everybody knows a turkey and some mistletoe help to make the season bright. But singing along to Yuletide classics and new holiday favorites is what really makes the holly jolly. CBC Music unwraps the gift of holiday playlists to get you into the festive spirit. From pop to jazz, gospel, folk, blues, classical, country, and so many more. Now available on the CBC Listen app.
Oh, holy night, the star is brightly shining. That's all.
That's all you got, Mom?
Yeah.
Hi, it's me, Jim Agapito. And that, of course, is my Yuletide-loving mom, Yolanda. She is my unofficial guide, and heck, the star of my CBC podcast, Recovering Filipino. She taught me all sorts of things about being Filipino, but we never got to tackle one of the biggies, Christmas. Join me for a special Recovering Filipino, the longest Christmas season in the world. You can hear it here on CBC Radio 1 at noon on Boxing Day, or you can find it on the CBC Listen app or wherever you get your podcasts.
It's 20 minutes after 6 o'clock. Good morning, Manitoba. You're listening to Information Radio on CBC Radio 1. I'm Emily Brass, filling in this week for Marcy Marcusa, taking a look at the forecast for today in Winnipeg. Sunny, breezy this morning, but becoming light this afternoon and very mild with a high of +4. Tonight, clear, becoming partly cloudy around midnight, the low of -6. And tomorrow, mainly cloudy, breezy in the morning, high -2. Turning to Brandon, it'll be sunny today and breezy, becoming light in the afternoon, high +3, so mild out there as well. Clear tonight, becoming partly cloudy around midnight, so that might affect the northern light viewing. And then tomorrow, a mix of sun and cloud, becoming cloudy around noon in Brandon, breezy with a high of 0. The United Nations General Assembly passed a resolution this week calling for an immediate humanitarian ceasefire in Gaza. Over 150 member nations voted in favor, 10 were opposed, and 23 nations abstained. Canada's one of the countries that voted in favor of a ceasefire. For more on the story and how this conflict is affecting international relations going forward, we've reached Rami Khouri. He's the Distinguished Public Policy Fellow at the American University of Beirut. Hi, good morning.
Hey, good morning, Emily.
So, what did the vote at the United Nations General Assembly tell you about how governments around the world now view the ongoing war in Gaza?
It tells me two things. It tells me that there's a near global consensus among almost all people of the world and their governments that this situation cannot continue, that it's become clearly, as scholars of genocide have said recently in the last couple of weeks several times, that this is a genocide, what Israel is doing. It meets 3 of the 5 criteria of a genocide and the Global Genocide Convention. So the world doesn't want this to go on, except for 1 or 2 countries. One of them, of course, is the United States, which has the power which enables Israel to keep doing what it's doing. The second thing it tells me is that countries change their policies and leaders change their mind. And this happens because pressure is put on them from their own public opinion, from international demonstrations and protests, and various other mechanisms. So this is a good sign that there's a huge majority for ending the violence and having a ceasefire. And let's hope that the U.S. finally, like Canada did, joins the club of the good guys.
In October, Canada abstained during a similar vote at the UN General Assembly, and this time Canada voted in favor of a ceasefire. It also issued a joint statement with New Zealand and Australia. What do you think about Canada's change in position?
Well, I think it's good. It tells us that Canada is behaving like Canada always used to behave, as a nation that respects the rule of law, that wants to have good relations with everybody in the world, that tries to play a constructive role in resolving or doing peacekeeping in conflicts. So this is historically Canada's legacy. It changed in the last few years for some reason that only you and Canada can define. It changed and became much closer to the U.S. and to the Israelis. But what's happened is that Canada now, recently found itself in a corner with just a handful of other countries in the world being subjected to massive international pressure, and they're whispering that, hey, there's the International Criminal Court where we can have people tried for being accomplices in a genocide. And there's already law cases in the U.S. against Biden and the Foreign and Defense Secretaries exactly on this point. So I think this is a good sign from Canada that it changed.
Well, and how does this change in position impact other nations, and perhaps also turning towards a ceasefire?
Yes, it remains to be seen. It depends on really how activist the Canadian government wants to be. Historically, it has not been out in front leading these processes, but has been very active in the diplomatic mechanics, and negotiation and peacemaking and peacekeeping, all of these things. So I'm hoping that Canada will get more involved at the UN and global diplomacy. It has the respect of the whole world. I mean, it took a hit in the last couple of years, but it's obviously changing that and wants to return to what Canada always has been. And it has the capacity to influence others if it wants to. So this is the next debate that you and Canada have to have, and to discuss how far out front do we want to be in pushing the world to do the right thing. And I would urge you to move in that direction.
And meanwhile, U.S. President Joe Biden said that support for Israel is softening among supporters on account of what he called indiscriminate bombing. How do you interpret Biden's remarks, putting the situation in those terms?
I interpret it in 2 ways. One, that even old men who do bad things suddenly wake up when they realize that they're doing bad things and they need to change. And then I also interpret it in the sense that political leaders will respond to political pressure. Politicians want one thing in life mainly, with a few exceptions here and there, but they mainly want to perpetuate their incumbency. They want to stay in office. And they need voter support to do that. And if they see that the voter support is being shaken, they will change their policies. And this is exactly what Biden is indicating. The polling in the U.S. clearly shows that young Democrats and Democrats of color are very, very critical of what the U.S. is doing by not just protecting Israel diplomatically and the genocidal attack on Gaza, but in providing the means, the money and the arms to do it. So Biden is now hinting, he's starting to, it took a while, so 3 months, but he's now saying, 2 months. It took about 2 months to get this kind of shift in policy, and now it's only at the rhetorical level, but that's how, rhetoric is the first step to action. So I'm pleased that Biden is saying this, but I want to see action to put it into practice.
Thanks so much for joining us this morning to talk about this.
Thank you, Emily. Glad to be with you.
That's Rami Khouri, the Distinguished Public Policy Fellow at the American University of Beirut, and we reached him today in Massachusetts.
Pretty paper, strings of light.
Music with a dose of melancholy from Conception Bay, South Newfoundland. That was Quote the Raven with This Year. And that's very Newfoundland to have joy mixed with melancholy. They feel all the emotions out there in Newfoundland. Nice to hear from them. It's 6:30 now. Time for the news.
This is CBC News. At 6:30, we're at 0 with mostly clear skies over downtown Winnipeg. We're expecting a mild day ahead. It's good to be with you this morning. I'm Matt Humphrey. The NDP government says steps are being taken to keep the provincial deficit from rising further. The finance minister says roughly $123 million is being saved through a combination of measures. Efforts to stockpile personal protective equipment and healthcare beyond what's needed will be reduced. More money will be saved by axing a program brought in by the former Tory government. It had paid public sector employees to come up with suggestions to improve services. The government says these measures will allow it to fulfill more campaign promises. Now to Washington.
On this vote, the yeas are 221 and the nays are 212. The resolution is adopted.
The U.S. House of Representatives has authorized an impeachment inquiry into U.S. President Joe Biden. The Republicans have a majority in the chamber. James Comer is the representative from Kentucky.
Evidence uncovered has shown a very disturbing trend by the Biden family. We've spent months in this investigation accumulating evidence. We have a simple question that I think an overwhelming majority of Americans have. What did the Bidens do to receive the tens of millions of dollars from our enemies around the world?
But Democrats like Jim McGovern says President Biden has done nothing wrong.
This whole thing is an extreme political stunt. It has no credibility, no legitimacy, and no integrity. It is a sideshow, a distraction from the fact that Republicans have done nothing.
The probe is looking at whether Biden improperly benefited from his son Hunter Biden's business dealings. Ukrainians in Manitoba will have two opportunities to celebrate Christmas this year. Ukrainian President Vladimir Zelensky signed a law moving his country's official Christmas Day to December 25th instead of January 7th. It's part of abandoning what's seen as Russian heritage after Vladimir Putin's invasion almost 2 years ago. Some churches in Canada are following suit. Holy Trinity Ukrainian Orthodox Cathedral in Winnipeg will hold services on December 25th. Father Eugene Maximuk wants to make the transition as easy as possible for families.
So we will be celebrating on the 6th and the 7th as well, just as a way to allow those families that are still, very much would like to celebrate at least one more Christmas on the Julian calendar to have the opportunity to do so.
The Julian calendar is observed by the Russian Orthodox Church and some other Eastern Orthodox churches. Maximuk says Holy Trinity will switch to the Gregorian calendar in February of next year. U.S. National Security Advisor Jake Sullivan is in Israel for 2 days of talks with the Israeli War Cabinet. Sullivan will be raising Washington's growing concerns about civilian deaths in Gaza. John Northcott has your details.
Amid rising tensions between the U.S. president and the Israeli prime minister, Jake Sullivan is trying to send a message while striking a diplomatic balance. He'll be meeting with Benjamin Netanyahu and his war cabinet. Sullivan's message coming from the U.S. president that Israel has to be more precise as it continues its intense bombing of Gaza. Joe Biden has described that bombing as, in his words, indiscriminate, with half of the air-to-ground attacks carried out so far described as unguided. The U.S. wants Israel to be more, quote, surgical in its strikes. Israel, on the other hand, insists its intent has always been to limit civilian casualties. As the war against Hamas continues, 9 Israeli soldiers were killed in an ambush in northern Gaza. Gazan health officials are now putting the number of Palestinian dead at more than 18,000. John Northcott, CBC News, Toronto.
And finally, it's been a rough start to the holiday season for the Salvation Army. The charity's annual Kettle campaign is hoping to raise $300,000 in Winnipeg, but with a week and a half to go, they're only at a quarter of that. Area Commander Captain Ian Scott says they don't have enough volunteers signing up to ring the bells.
Because when there's no one there, people don't see them. And so even though the kettle stand may be there, if you don't have a person, you lose that interaction and you lose that relationship piece with the community. And people don't donate to an empty stand.
The Kettle campaign is the Salvation Army's main fundraiser for the year. Scott says volunteers can sign up online for 2-hour shifts at whichever location is most convenient for them. And for news anytime, head on over to cbc.ca/Manitoba or use the CBC News app.
Matt, you know how many kettles I've seen so far?
How many?
1.
Really?
Yeah, I had to go to the mall and I saw one there. I mean, I guess I'm not always at the places where the kettles are. Have you seen any?
Well, I mean, if there were bells ringing, I might have seen them faster.
Oh, yeah. This guy was ringing his bell. So, yeah,
Good
made
for
me
him.
look.
Good. That's good.
Thanks so much, Matt.
Back soon.
That's Matt Humphrey from the CBC Newsroom. You're listening to Information Radio on CBC Radio 1, 89.3 FM in Winnipeg. I'm Emily Brass, in for Marcy Marcusa. Abby Adiemi is our studio technician. Travis Peterson is producer of our CBC Manitoba YouTube channel. And our show director, Pat Kanuga, joins us now with a look at weather and traffic.
Good morning.
Good morning.
I am just trying to bring up satellite images again, and I'll tell you that the entire bottom 2/3 of the province is clear. So, yes, that's why Abby was able to see the northern lights last night. And Emily, I've been looking through Environment Canada's current temperatures and forecast today all over the province. I cannot find a daytime high that's below 0.
Wow.
Yeah, I'll get to those in a second. I mean, even places such as Churchill is 3 right now.
Oh, my
it's going
gosh.
to cool down 2 to a +1. And Lynn Lake, which has been the cold spot off and on the past couple of mornings. It is -2 right now on the way to a +2. So those are the temperatures we're looking at today. Clear skies and mild temperatures here in the Peg. We are 0 right now, and we're going to get to a 4 on the plus side. Some wind from the south this afternoon, 20 to 25, this morning. Then it lightens up a little bit southwest to 15 this afternoon. Lots of sunshine. Tonight, clear again, -6. For the overnight temp. Tomorrow, a +1. Into your weekend, we'll wake up to a -8 on Saturday morning, on the way to a -1 and a -3 on Sunday. So again, just hovering just below that 0 temperature for the weekend for Winnipeg. Over in Brandon, we'll take a peek at Brandon because this is the regional forecast from the CBC Forecast Center. It is Thursday, December 14th, by the way. -2 right now in Brandon, sunshine and 3 today. Wind will be gusting to 40 this morning. It'll lighten up this afternoon. Tonight, clear skies, -8. Tomorrow, mix of sun and cloud, and another 0 for a daytime high tomorrow for Brandon. And Thompson, you have some warm temperatures as well. It's only -3 right now. You're going to get to a +1, mainly sunny skies as well. Tonight, a few clouds and an overnight low of -10, and then -4 tomorrow. Now, don't worry, Thompson. It does get colder. We see some overnight lows by Saturday, Sunday, and Monday in the -20s or so. And daytime highs, we're still going to be warm for the next few days for Thompson, but by Sunday, a -13 for a daytime high. Temps, as mentioned, Emily, so we have a -4 in Gimli right now, and the Interlake on the way to a +4. Morden Winkler, -5. We'll see a +3 there. Melitta's going to see a +3 as well. It's -5 right now. Pilot Mound, Crystal City, good morning to you. A +3 is in your forecast today. You're -4 right now. Dauphin Parkland, 3, going to jump 1 to 4 today. And in Winnipeg right now, once again, it is 0. In traffic, a couple of calls already. We told you about the lights that were flashing red at Broadway and Osborne Memorial area there, right beside the ledge. And crews were working on them. Megan Ketchison came in the newsroom and said crews were there. And then Zach gave us a call a little while ago on the traffic line at 788-3093 and said that they were working at that point and crews were still there. Also, the Cautious Courier called. Highway 15, he comes in from Dugald. Smooth sailing, no ice patches, anything. Cautious Courier is one of our regulars here, so thank you for the call, Cautious Courier. Always appreciated. Once again, that traffic and commuter line is 788-3093.
Thank you so much, Pat. You don't need to be so cautious today. Sounds like it's pretty nice out there. It is now 6:38. You're listening to Information Radio on CBC Radio 1. I'm Emily Brass. Time now for some business news. Phil Dumont is here with today's CBC Business Report. Good morning, Phil.
You want to know how bad I am with technology?
Uh-oh, tell us.
They tried to get the Zoom up so you kind of, run with your program. I got it all installed, looked up, and then Abby said, "Do you have a camera?" And I looked around and went, "Oh, I guess I don't have a camera on my computer." So, it took me 20 minutes to figure that out.
Put it on your Christmas list, maybe?
Yeah, maybe.
Okay, so the U.S. Feds left interest rates alone on Wednesday, and the markets exploded. I mean, what was driving that trend?
Yeah, the Fed did what people expected yesterday, left interest rates alone, 5.5%, but the central bank also said it planned to cut interest rates next year 3 times and 4 times in 2025. So when the dust settles, that means that 5.5% would become 3.75% by 2025, and that's a big drop downward. So markets yesterday took off as a result. The Dow up 500 points plus, above 37,000 for the first time ever. The TSX up 2%, almost 400 points. Oil was up 3.5%. On one day. Gold up almost 3%. Here's what's going on, though. The first buyers in these markets are generally what are called momentum players. Now, these are investors who are looking to, buy in, but sell fairly quickly. That's when the second wave comes in. People who are maybe reluctant, but start growing more optimistic as the news gets better and better. It's the second group, Emily, you worry about. That's because the reasons why the global economy was sputtering last week, they're still kind of here. China is in a low growth period. It's the second biggest economy on the planet. Consumers in the U.S., China, and Canada have too much debt and face higher prices with everything they buy. But inflation's still above the target for most central banks. So if the Fed can't stick to its cut schedule because inflation starts going up again, or if the economy tanks because consumers stop buying, then Wednesday's economic happy bullet train could grind to an abrupt halt.
So moving from the happy bullet train to the future of electric vehicles, suddenly it's not looking as bright as it once did. What does that mean for hybrids?
Yeah, it's interesting because hybrids, the ones that run on gas and electricity, were kind of becoming an afterthought, but growing problems in the EV market, giving them new life. Here's what's going on. EV sales are on pace to grow 35% this year, but there had been predictions last year of worldwide sales maybe doubling. The inventory of electric vehicles was 52 days in January. It's now 111 days. That means cars aren't getting sold. Ford just announced production cuts for its electrified F-150 trucks, and Tesla just announced a major EV car recall. Now, to be clear, electric car and trucks the share of the U.S. vehicle market's up this year from 5.2% last year to about 7% this year. But hybrids making a comeback. They were roughly the same market share last year as electric vehicles, but now their market share is 8.3%. So they're actually outselling electric cars. One reason, perception that pure electric vehicles have more problems than hybrids, probably true, but also the price. Price of a hybrid now is $17,000 cheaper than an electric vehicle. It's actually cheaper to buy a hybrid than a gas-powered car or truck. And car companies are motivated to push the hybrid. That's because they help automakers move towards the goal of zero-free emissions. Maybe not as fast as pure electric vehicles, but they're better than combustion engine cars.
And moving on to stamp collectors, a single stamp recently sold for $2 million. Which one is that?
Yeah, I collected stamps as a kid, and I love doing it, but this is out of my price range.
Yeah.
It's known as the inverted Jenny. Sold in November to a New York collector for $2 million. Stamp comes from 1918 and has the image of a Curtiss JN-4 biplane on it. Fine. Trick is the plane's upside down. It was an airmail stamp, a big deal when air travel first began, and a sheet of 100 of the upside-down Jennies was shipped before anybody noticed the problem. This one that was sold last month was in position 49 because I knew where everyone was. In 1982, for example, an inverted Jenny sold for $145,000, but it's not the only stamp to go for big money. A couple I found, a 1968 stamp from China, which had an error, only one of 9 in existence, went for $2 million in 2018, and a stamp from, the Mauritius Post Office went for $4 million back in 1993.
Oh my goodness. I wonder if the stamp maker of that upside down airplane lost his job or her job. I wouldn't be surprised. So what's happening in the market so far this morning?
Right now, those proposed Fed cuts supercharging Europe. So Germany up more than 0.5%, France up more than 1%, UK up more than 1.5%. A bit more mixed in Asia. Hong Kong was up, but the Nikkei in Japan, Shanghai, they were down. Oil up, $1.14 today, $70.61 a barrel. Gold's up $52, $2,049 an ounce. And the Canadian dollar up more than 0.5 cent, trading at 74.37 cents U.S.
Thanks, Phil.
Thanks, Emily.
That was Phil DeMont with the business news. Coming up on 6:45, and you're listening to Information Radio on CBC Radio 1, 89.3 FM in Winnipeg, worldwide on our CBC Manitoba YouTube channel, and as well on the CBC Listen app. I'm Emily Brass, filling in this week for Marcy Marcusa. The federal government wants to make it easier for you to renew your mortgage. Announced in the fall economic statement, their solution is called the Canada Mortgage Charter. It outlines changes to the mortgage stress test, among other things. CBC's personal finance columnist Rubina Ahmed-Haq has a look at the charter to see what's in it for you.
In its fall economic statement, the federal government announced the Canada Mortgage Charter, a list of rules it's suggesting financial institutions follow to make it easier for home buyers to manage their mortgage payments. The charter also details changes that are coming to the rules around the mortgage stress test. Up until now, all borrowers had to prove they could make payments at a rate higher than what their bank was offering. Now the charter states that for some who've already been through the test, they will not have to do it twice.
It's a pretty small subset of the population that could take advantage of this opportunity.
Andy Hill is a mortgage broker in Vancouver. The changes to the stress test only apply to existing homeowners who are renewing their mortgage and want to shop around for a better rate. He explains the conditions to qualify for this exemption.
Well, if that homeowner would have bought a property with less than 20% down and paid the government-backed mortgage insurance at that point in time, also had not made any changes to their mortgage within that term, then they would be able to move the mortgage from one lender to the other.
Hill says that homeowners could do this without doing a second stress test, which for new applicants would be required. Critics say the changes outlined in the new Canada Mortgage Charter will do little to help those renewing their mortgage in this higher rate environment, because any fixed rate mortgage coming up for renewal soon will be faced with a dramatically higher rate and possibly higher payments.
I know my clients who are facing anxiety as their renewal comes up about, what their payments are going to be.
Jackie Porter is a certified financial planner. She says the federal government's announcements don't really change the financial reality for Canadians facing higher payments.
For every dollar we have, we're in a lot of debt. So I think that the key thing for every Canadian household to do is look at ways that they can become more fiscally responsible, because we become very comfortable with debt as a country. And yes, the government can always do more, but we have to also look at our finances. A lot of people got into the housing market because interest rates were low, so they thought they could afford it.
The new Canada Mortgage Charter is not a law, but rather a set of guidelines for banks to follow. They also include temporary extensions on the amortization, waiving fees charged for mortgage relief measures, contacting homeowners 6 months before renewal about rate options, providing penalty-free ways to avoid negative amortization, waiving interest on interest in regards to mortgage relief measures. These options, both experts say, have always been available to mortgage holders. This is nothing new that the Canada Mortgage Charter is offering. But mortgage broker Hill points out that it's a reminder for banks to make these options available, because not all readily do, as well to anyone renewing to take advantage of their situation.
I would certainly encourage a bit of comparative shopping, whether you're going to move the mortgage or not, just to ensure that you're not overpaying for the mortgage for the next few years.
Interest rates are higher than they have been in decades. Reminding mortgage holders of their options is good, but no matter what, anyone renewing their mortgage will be faced with much higher borrowing costs in 2024. For CBC Radio, I'm Rubina Ahmed Haq.
It's now 12 minutes before 7 o'clock. You're listening to Information Radio on CBC Radio 1, 89.3 FM in Winnipeg. I'm Emily Brass. Taking a quick look at the forecast for today. Sunny and mild with a high of 4. A bit breezy this morning, but that wind becoming milder this afternoon. Tonight, mainly clear, going down to a low of -6. Tomorrow, a mix of sun and clouds. Breezy in the afternoon with a high of +1. Well, still coming up in the show, we've been hearing a lot about the growing need for housing in Winnipeg, but once people land that housing, they also need furniture. We'll hear from 2 Winnipeg groups that are hustling hard to combat furniture poverty in our city. And also, he said his swearing-in ceremony marked the dawn of a new day for our province. Now, 2 months on the job, how's Premier Wab Kinew doing? We're going to have our monthly meetup coming up soon. And a quick look at the traffic now. The lights are back working at Broadway and Osborne. The signal crews were up early as they were flashing red in the wee hours. That has now been resolved.
Oh, holy night, the star is brightly shiny. That's all.
That's all you got, Mom?
Yeah.
Hi, it's me, Jim Agapito, and that, of course, is my Yuletide-loving mom, Yolanda. She is my unofficial guide, and heck, the star of my CBC podcast, Recovering Filipino. She taught me all sorts of things about being Filipino, but we never got to tackle one of the biggies, Christmas. Join me for a special Recovering Filipino, the longest Christmas season in the world. You can hear it here on CBC Radio 1 at noon on Boxing Day, or you can find it on the CBC Listen app or wherever you get your podcasts.
10 minutes before 7 o'clock, and you're listening to Information Radio on CBC Radio 1. I'm Emily Brass. Well, the children are nestled all snug in their beds while visions of phones and gaming consoles dance in their heads. While the holidays might seem like a time to put down the electric devices, they can also mean more tech and more screen time. Joining us now with tips on how to manage it all is Cara Breesen-Boyven. She's Director of Research for Media Smarts. That's a Canadian not-for-profit center for digital and media literacy. Good morning, Cara.
Morning. Thank you for having me.
Great to have you. So what do families need to think about when it comes to screen time over the holidays?
I think the holidays can be a time for shared screen activities where, we can, utilize these devices as tools that just really encourage and facilitate meaningful engagement, together. So things like, creative activities or using devices to get our bodies moving and be physical, get outside, and genuinely social uses of technology. So this might include, connecting with family and friends who we can't physically be with over the holidays, or playing games together, playing video games together, and watching content together.
Mm-hmm. So what are some ways to encourage kids and, for being honest, adults too, to put away their devices and engage with the family?
Yeah, Media Smarts has worked with the Pediatric Society to develop the 4M model, and really it applies to all of us. It's about minimizing screen use, using screens mindfully, mitigating media effects, and modeling good use. So minimizing screen use is about finding those times and places that, we're going to have no device use. There's going to be no screen zones. Often we hear from families that this is at, mealtime. Using screens mindfully means actively choosing when and how we use those devices. So not having the TV on all the time as background noise, for example. Mitigating media effects might involve co-viewing content together as a family. And this doesn't necessarily mean that we have to be in the room all the time, especially with older youth, but it does mean encouraging critical thinking, asking questions about the kind of content that we're watching or engaging with, and getting especially children and youth to talk back to the media that's in their lives. And then finally, all of this is really sort of built on a foundation of modeling good use. And as a parent, I know how hard that is to do, but we really do have to walk the walk, because sometimes what we do speaks louder than what we say.
I can't tell you how many young people I've heard say they're asking for a video game or a new console on their Christmas list. But what should parents consider when they're looking at technology as gifts?
Yeah, I think, it's first and foremost important to acknowledge that, it's okay to give these things as gifts, and, for kids to want them, there is some, genuine sort of value in being able to, play games with their peers. And often, our research is showing that, for young people, and I think for all of us, devices are important in our lives in a variety of different ways. However, we also have to help, especially children and youth, start to establish those healthy device uses. So at Media Smarts, we've designed what we call a new device contract. And it sounds a bit counterintuitive to give a gift and a contract, but it really is a series of commitments from both sides, from parents, as well, what we sort of promise to do around this device, things like not necessarily spying on a young person, but being clear about instances where we would have to follow up. Promising to always be there for them so they do come speak to us when they have a challenging situation. And of course, the expectations around behavior use that we have of the young person, things like protecting their privacy and their safety online, being respectful when they're using the device and engaging with others. And the contract is flexible enough to allow families to co-design these rules and boundaries in a way that reflect their own family values. And at the end of the day, especially for teens and tweens, it's really important that they feel like they have a stake, that they've had some kind of say in the development of these boundaries and rules, because the research shows that they're far more likely to follow those rules if they feel like they've also had a say in developing them.
Mm-hmm. That's interesting. So you and your colleagues have come up with an idea for a new device contract. What would be included in that?
Yeah, that's those series of commitments I was speaking to. So it really allows families to reflect on certainly instances where we may not want to have devices, like we talked about, maybe at mealtime, but also, those kinds of expectations around behavior and instances where you would want a young person to come and speak with you. Because at the end of the day, we want to build that foundation of trust where young people will come and speak to us, And we also want to provide them, the kind of training wheels, if you like, to be able to, develop healthy media use and tech habits that we will and they need to be able to do, or expect them to do on their own as adults.
Oh, yeah, that's true. So just in our last minute or so here, Kara, how do you negotiate with an older child or a teenager who already has a device?
Yeah, obviously, as we've been talking about, it's really helpful and valuable to implement these at, as early an age as possible. But I would say it's never too late, especially with an older young person who, may, or teen, who may already have, and perhaps is developing some, unhealthy, habits. We want to encourage especially older youth to engage in self-reflection. So you want to put them in the driver's seat and ask them questions about whether their device use is matching up with the goals they have for themselves. Asking them to reflect on whether device use is starting to replace activities that they used to really enjoy, maybe soccer or theater club. But again, we just really want to get them to do that self-reflection so that they're starting to build those habits and practices or reassess them and we sort of, change some of those behaviors, starting from, sort of within themselves.
I'd say that's good advice for adults too. Thanks
Absolutely.
so much. Thanks so much for joining us, Kara.
My pleasure. Thank you for having me.
And that was Kara Breeson-Boyven, Director of Research at Media Smarts. Just a few minutes before 7 o'clock, and Matt Humphrey joins us now with a look at the CBC News headlines.
Good morning. The Salvation Army's largest holiday fundraiser is the Kettle Campaign, but the organization says there's a lack of volunteers this year to ring collection bells this time around. Right now, the campaign has raised only a quarter of its goal. We'll hear more about recruiting efforts at the bottom of the hour, along with various other news stories from the CBC Manitoba Newsroom.
Thanks so much, Matt.
Back soon.
That's CBC's Matt Humphrey from the CBC News Desk. Well, we're coming up on 7 o'clock, soon to be into World Report. Quick look at the weather right now for you. Sunny and mild today, going up to a high of +4. Breezy this morning, but that wind is going to be easing up as we move on into the afternoon. Right now, it's 0 degrees at the Forks. Tonight, mainly clear, going down to a low of -6. Tomorrow, a mix of sun and clouds, going to a high of +1, and breezy in the afternoon. For the weekend, looking pretty good. Mix of sun and clouds, high -1 on Saturday, and breezy in the afternoon. And for Sunday, a mix of sun and clouds with a high of -3. Well, still to come in the next hour, Premier Canoe has had the province's top job for about 8 weeks now. How's he tackling the top issues facing people in our province? He'll be here in studio for a monthly meetup with the Premier. Are you tired of the hustle and bustle of the mall? Do you want to save money and celebrate the holiday season in ways that are environmentally friendly? If you said yes to any of those points, Thriftmas. Yes, Thriftmas might be just what you need. That's after the 7 o'clock news. But up first, we've heard a lot about the housing shortage in Manitoba. How about the shortage of used furniture? We're going to speak to a couple of organizations that provide used furniture to people in need in our province. You're listening to Information Radio on CBC Radio 1, 89.3 FM in Winnipeg, worldwide on our CBC Manitoba YouTube channel and the CBC Listen app. We'll be back in just a little bit after World Report.
Today on The Current.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to the Grand Master Journey.
Levi Rosman is known as the internet's chess teacher, and he's trying to change the game's nerdy image for his 4 million YouTube fans. Levi Rosman on the boom in chess and how to bring more people to the game, coming up on The Current.
The Current with Matt Galloway. This morning at 8:37, 9:07 in Newfoundland, and on the CBC Listen app.
This is World Report. Good morning from CBC News. I'm Marcia Young. There will likely be some tense discussion when Jake Sullivan meets with Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu and his cabinet today. The U.S. National Security Advisor is on a 2-day visit to Israel. It comes as the White House is expressing concern about what President Joe Biden calls Israel's indiscriminate bombing of Gaza. The CBC's Richard Madden is in Washington. And Richard, what are we expecting Sullivan to say?
Yeah, White House officials say he'll hold, and I'm quoting here, extremely serious conversations with Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu and look for ways to smooth over this growing public rift that's emerged between these two staunch allies over Israel's approach to the war. Now, you'll recall over the past few days, President Joe Biden has openly criticized what he calls Israel's indiscriminate bombing in Gaza. He even warned Netanyahu that Israel is losing global support with its military campaign as the number of people killed continues to rise. So Jake Sullivan will reiterate those concerns and efforts to free the 8 American hostages still being held by Hamas. He's also expected to push Israel's military to be more precise in their war operations to avoid civilian casualties. Take a listen to National Security spokesperson Admiral John Kirby.
He's going to talk to them about progress on the battlefield, how it's going. He's going to talk to them about reductions in civilian harm. He's going to talk to them about trying to get another pause in place so that we can get more hostages out.
Now, President Biden has said repeatedly he supports a two-state solution, but Netanyahu does not. So Jake Sullivan will also likely press Israel how it sees an endgame and what a future for Palestinians will look like after the war.
And what can you tell us about how this war is publicly revealing the divisions within the White House?
Yeah, there was an unusual scene outside the White House last night. Dozens of political staffers protesting outside their workplace, including a former State Department official who quit last month over the administration's approach to the war. Now, many progressive Democrats, not just staffers, but members of Congress in key swing states, are demanding Biden push harder for a ceasefire, something the president does not support.
All right. Thank you, Richard.
Thank you.
The CBC's Richard Madden in Washington. Russian President Vladimir Putin is taking questions in his largest news conference since the country's full-scale invasion of Ukraine. The annual event normally lasts several hours. Last year it was canceled, but this time around, Putin is using his time to gloat about Ukraine's stalled counteroffensive. Briar Stewart has more on that.
As Vladimir Putin sat down for a news conference carried live by all of the main Russian television channels, it was clearly the type of event he relishes, one where he's front and center, and it's designed to make him look like a powerful, confident leader. Among the live studio audience were some journalists who were called on individually, while organizers said more than 2 million questions were submitted by Russians ahead of time. Some of those who wanted to question the president, the wives of soldiers who've been mobilized. On social media, they've been demanding that their men be returned. According to Western officials, more than 300,000 Russian fighters have been killed or wounded since the start of the full-scale invasion. Today, Putin said Russia's plans for Ukraine haven't changed, and he highlighted the fact that financial support from the country's biggest backer could be drying up. Everything is given to them as a freebie, he said, but these freebies could end, and they seem to be ending little by little. U.S. President Joe Biden has said that if lawmakers don't agree on providing Ukraine with a new package of more than $60 billion in aid, that will be a Christmas gift for Putin.
But the war's getting into a more political phase now.
Sir Alex Young is a former boss of MI6, Britain's secret intelligence service.
If Putin is seen to have succeeded in reordering the borders of another country by force, then that is not going to be the end of a story.
And it doesn't appear to be the end of Putin's time in power. He will run and most certainly win in the election this spring and secure another 6 years as president. Briar Stewart, CBC News, London.
Money for Ukraine is top of the agenda at the final European Union Leaders Summit of the year. It begins today in Brussels. Another agenda item is Ukraine's membership in the EU. But Hungary has been unmoved in its stance. President Viktor Orban said again this morning there is no reason to negotiate the possibility of Ukraine joining the EU.
Enlargement is not a theoretical issue. Enlargement is a merit-based, legally detailed process, which has preconditions. We have set up 7 preconditions, and even by the evaluation of the Commission, 3 out of the 7 is not fulfilled. So there is no reason to negotiate.
Before meetings began, French President Emmanuel Macron, German Chancellor Olaf Scholz met with Orban in an attempt to find a way forward. A First Nation in eastern Ontario has declared a state of emergency. Pikwakanagan is struggling to cope with an opioid crisis. The community is about 150 kilometers west of Ottawa. As Nicole Williams reports, officials say the drug-related deaths there are higher than ever this year.
They are my people. And when they hurt, I hurt.
Michael Dustin Commando is seeing firsthand what opioid addiction is doing to his community. As a member of the Algonquins of Pikwakanagan First Nation, of just 500 people located in the Ottawa Valley, he says everyone knows each other and are connected to the people who died from overdosing, adding to the devastation.
I do have family that has drug addictions, and I see no change of them getting better.
Officials say the frequency of overdoses and deaths is growing. Before 2020, there were 5 drug-related deaths on average per year. This year, 12 people have died. Those who work at the Pikwakanagan Health Centre say they're responding to at least 3 overdoses a week. Community members have been calling for urgent action, and council responded by declaring a state of emergency in November. Greg Sarzan is chief.
And it's reached a point where the community has said, well, enough is enough. We need to do something about this.
In declaring a state of emergency, Pikwakanagan is able to access government funding for addictions programming and partnerships with provincial and federal agencies to develop an action plan, as well as more police. Sarzan says the state of emergency will remain in place for as long as necessary. Nicole Williams, CBC News, Pikwakanagan First Nation, Ontario.
In British Columbia, the coroner issued a public safety warning on drug overdose. Some people are dying from illegally sourced drugs. Officials say preliminary data shows toxic drugs caused 200 overdose deaths last month. The coroner's service adds BC is expected to post record drug deaths this year. Last year, it had a record high of 2,400 deaths. The ringleader of what's believed to be Canada's biggest art fraud is being sentenced today in an Ontario court. Gary Lamont pleaded guilty for his role producing counterfeit Norval Morrisseau paintings. The Indigenous artist died in 2007. Morrisseau is known for his vibrant and colorful style. The CBC's Michelle Allen reports.
You're filled with rage and disappointment on a cultural level.
Calgary Inuit and First Nations art dealer Sophia Lebesis says news of the fraud ring, which fabricated and sold hundreds of fake Norval Morrisseau paintings, has left its impact on Indigenous people in the arts.
Because it's like, here's another aspect of our lives that are just destroyed, just taken over and destroyed.
The ringleader in what police are calling the largest art fraud in Canadian history is being sentenced this morning. Gary Lamont pled guilty to a charge of making false documents and a count of defrauding the public for his role in forging the Morrisseau pieces. Court docs showed Lamont traded cash and drugs for paintings from other Indigenous artists, then had Morrisseau's name signed on them.
It's severely muddied his legacy.
Jonathan Summer is a lawyer who specializes in art forgery. He says this specific example has led to police and courts taking art fraud more seriously, and that he's glad to finally see some accountability.
Morrisseau had his own language that he spoke with through his artwork. And when people make fakes, they distort and undermine that language. They confuse it.
The other 7 people charged for their involvement in Lamont's art fraud ring are also expected to appear in court today. Michelle Allen, CBC News, Thunder Bay.
Mickey Mouse is about to belong to you and me. That is Mickley whistling away in Steamboat Willie, his very first screen appearance. The copyright of the 1928 short film expires on New Year's Day. So that version of Mickey Mouse will become part of the public domain January 1, and so will his Steamboat Willie co-star, Minnie Mouse. That's World Report. I'm Marcia Young.
officially moved from January 7th to December 25th. It's part of an effort to move away from Russian heritage. Now people here are dealing with that transition. We'll hear about it at the bottom of the hour at 7:30.
Thank you, Matt.
Back soon.
That's CBC's Matt Humphrey from our news desk. And joining us now in the studio with a look at the traffic is Pat Kanuga.
Good morning, everyone. At 7:12 in the morning, things are pretty smooth sailing out there. Traffic or signal crews got out really early this morning to fix the lights at Broadway and Osborne, which were flashing red in all directions at 4:30. They are all fixed now. It should be smooth sailing through there. Do watch out for some slippery side streets. With this temperature hovering around zero, it could be still a little bit slippery and greasy out there, so do know that. And the other order of the day is windshield washer fluid. It was sloppy coming in for me on Portage Avenue and Main Street, my route in the morning, so do remember that. If you have anything to let us know about that's happening on your commute this morning, 788-3093 is the traffic and commuter line. Now with a look at Winnipeg's forecast, here is Abby Adiemi.
Thanks, Pat. Currently in Winnipeg, as you start your day, we're waking up to clear skies with a southwest breeze. And of course, the cool temperature of the Forks is sitting at a 0 now. According to John Sutter, it's going to be mild today, so expect a sunny day ahead with the winds just shifting and becoming lighter as we approach the noon period. I must say, and I must add, today's going to be looking really bright with plenty of sunshine in the card. Currently, we are heading to a high of 4 today, and sunrise is at 8:19 a.m. and sunset will be at 4:27 p.m.
7:13 a.m. and you're listening to Information Radio on CBC Radio 1. I'm Emily Brass. Well, if you're a newcomer without much funds or someone who's transitioning from a shelter into your own home, you're likely going to need some furniture. But that's not always so easy to find. Our next guests say this province is seeing a shortage of used furniture, and their organizations are trying to help by offering furniture to people in need for free. Deb Huff is volunteer coordinator at the Furniture Bank Oyate Tipi. That's on Dufferin Avenue in Winnipeg, and she joins us in studio. Good morning, Deb.
Good morning.
And also joining us over the phone is Gilbert Villefort. He's executive director of Centre Flavie in St. Boniface. Hi, Gilbert.
Good morning.
So, Dee, tell us a bit about your group, Oyate TP. Who are your clients and what are their needs?
We help individuals that have left domestic assault, domestic violence situations, youth that are aging out of care. We also help newcomers to the city. We help individuals who have been hospitalized for extended periods of time whose landlords have decided to turf their items out and they've got nothing.
And everyone is referred to you, right?
Yes.
And what kind of groups do that referral?
We have 22 to 24 different partnering agencies that help individuals that are needing the support services that those organizations offer. So those are the folks that come to us.
And you introduced me when we spoke the other day to a new term called furniture poverty. What's that and how big a problem is that in Winnipeg?
Furniture poverty is when you don't have the financial means to buy essentials that you need for your home. It's a term that is relatively new to most people because they don't really understand what that would mean. So when we're dealing with furniture poverty, those are individuals that simply do not have the resources, financial resources to pay for the essentials they need.
And Gilbert, your group offers all kinds of household wares. How big is the demand at Centre Flavie right now for used furniture?
I've been doing this for 19 years. It's pretty consistent. Keep in mind we serve 100 to 150 families every day, and we do give away all kinds of things, including furniture, appliances, clothing, household items, you name it, cars even. So furniture is definitely an important aspect of what we do, and the demand is always high. Our opening hours to the public, and we're open to anybody who calls himself in need. So whether they're coming out of whatever the situation is, immigrants, refugees, students, sometimes seniors on pensions, whatever the case is. I was going to say we're only open 9 to 1 Monday to Friday, and that's because by 1 o'clock, typically we are going to be empty of our goods.
And you guys gave out a lot of furniture last year, right?
Yeah, somewhere I think 2,500 sofas and living room chairs, about 2,300 beds, and close to 10,000 garbage bags of clothing.
And you mentioned a bit about some of the different people who come in, and we've been hearing a lot lately about the growing number of newcomers in Winnipeg, many of whom have very limited resources, especially when they first arrive. How many of your clients are in that situation?
More and more. About a year ago, it was mostly a Ukrainian-dominated clientele. That's definitely shifted over the last year. We've seen more as the group that you're referring to. And we know that the need's authentic because you look at what people select and you just have to sit there for 5 minutes. And when they choose a table and 4 different looking chairs because there's not a set available, people are more interested in sitting down than necessarily being cute in the dining room.
And not everybody asking for help from Centre Flavie is actually from within Winnipeg, right?
Yeah, that's right. We serve, there's no real set boundary to that. The majority are certain from the city, but not so long ago, at least 10% of our clients were coming from Northern Reserves, in fact.
Wow. So, Deb, what do you think might be driving up the numbers of people coming to Oyate, TP for help with furniture? Like, is there a connection to the pandemic?
I think there is. A lot of programs were closed down during the pandemic, and as a result, when you're desperate and you don't have those supports, sometimes you're going to turn to more sort of unhealthy choices for coping, and a lot of folks end up with substance abuse addictions and they end up out on the street. They're homeless. Yeah.
And then you mentioned domestic violence too. Did that go up in the pandemic?
It sure did. It really did. With people being in closed spaces and families not having supports outside of the home, it definitely went up.
And another factor, when we speak about some of the shortages of furniture in our city is that some of the big thrift stores, including Salvation Army, have stopped carrying used furniture in large part because of bed bugs.
Yes.
Deb, how big a problem is bed bug infestation, and what are you guys doing about that?
Bed bugs are an epidemic in the city. A lot of people don't realize that. What we do at Oyate is we heat treat everything that comes through. We have 2 heat trailers with generators, and we heat treat everything. It goes in for about a 4-hour heat treat, and that ensures that we're not giving away things that may be contaminated with bed bugs.
And Gilbert, you said Centre Flavie is also getting more calls from people wanting to donate used furniture, but how hard is it to keep up with that?
Well, we can't. We're running 5 3-ton trucks, and basically the wait time for us on pickups right now is anywhere from 5 to 6 weeks, and that's keeping in mind that we're going to 8 to 10 houses every day. So we're getting more and more people bringing the things to us because they just don't want to wait that long. So it's in our case is a nice problem to have.
But even with that increase in calls to donate, it's still hard to keep up with the demand?
Yeah, the other problem is we have only so much space, and we've just built a new 13,000 square foot building. Having said that, you can only store so much in there given the amount of clients. I'm, again, saying 400 or 500 clients coming to us every week. That's an exorbitant amount of people.
Yeah, that is a lot. Deb, what would you want people to know? Maybe they're paring down their household and they want to donate used goods. What would you want them to keep in mind?
Remember that just because it's old to you doesn't mean it's going to be old to somebody who has nothing. So if you have an old sofa or something that you no longer want in your home, if you're renovating or redecorating, we will take that. There's somebody out there who needs that item.
I know you touched on sheets and towels and things, but what about for the bigger items? Are people, able to bring that in? Are they expecting you to do it?
We do offer free drop-off. Obviously, they can come from 8:30 to 4:30 to our Dufferin location, and we will be able to offload. If they need it picked up, we do have a pickup service available for a fee.
Okay, and just in the last 20 seconds, Gilbert, you mentioned seeing some families living without the basics. Tell us about maybe one of the underfurnished homes you've seen recently.
Well, there's a lot of that going around. Our 2 priorities is people not eating or sleeping on floors. So, and I've seen that. Walked into homes where people are literally sitting on the floor and they're eating off of a cardboard box as the table. So, those are poignant scenes that you don't want to see too often. But that does happen, and we try to address the priorities, but everything's in need. So, it's just it's a big fire.
Thanks so much to both of you for coming in and talking about furniture poverty.
Thank you.
My pleasure. Thank you.
Dee Huff is volunteer coordinator at Yoati Tipi Furniture Bank, and Gilbert Viafor is executive director at Centre Flavie.
I watch the snowflakes fall again.
Seasonal feeling that seeps into the holidays. That was Little Christmas Tree by Kaja Bonet. Almost reminded me a bit of old school Michael Jackson, that really high voice. Beautiful stuff. You're listening to Information Radio on CBC Radio 1. It's 25 minutes after 7 o'clock, and I'm Emily Brass filling in this week for Marcy Marcusa. It's time for news from the world of sports. Claude Faig joins us from the CBC Sports Desk. Good morning, Claude.
Good morning, Emily. A bit of an early Christmas present for Jets fans last night.
They showed a lot of moxie coming back to beat the Kings last night in L.A.
Yeah, they certainly did, Emily. Jets proved that even without their leading scorer, Kyle Connor, they have enough offense to compete with some of the top teams in the Western Conference. Last night in Los Angeles, that balanced scoring was on display. They dug an early 2-0 hole, but Nick Ehlers delivered 2 goals and 4 points. Team points leader Mark Scheifele chipped in with 3 more. And Gabriel Velarde, a former Kings draft pick, also had a big night with a goal and a career-high 4 points. As the Jets won at 5-2, Velarde admits emotions were certainly running high facing his old team last night.
Obviously, coming here was a big deal, and I'm happy that we won. It's amazing to see all the guys stepping up and coming together for me and Al. Yeah, it was I guess you could say, a more emotional game than normal. But, I mean, I always sally and get emotional when I score. I like doing that.
And the Jets are off until Saturday when they host the Avalanche, Emily.
So it was one of the toughest days yesterday for some junior hockey hopefuls who were vying to represent Canada. What happened there?
Yeah, for sure, Emily. It was certainly a day of elation, but also devastation yesterday for some of Canada's top junior prospects who were hopeful of donning a Canadian jersey for the upcoming World Junior Hockey Championships in Sweden. Now, 30 players were invited to the camp in Oakville, Ontario, but only 22 got the thumbs up. And they include Manitoba natives Denton Matechuk from Dominion City, Connor Geekie from Strathclair, and Nate Danielson from the Brandon Wheat Kings. Also amongst the group is Macklin Celebrini. The early consensus is next summer's top draft pick in the NHL. The North Vancouver native admits the waiting game ran the gamut of emotions.
Like every kid, it's their dream to play for their Canada and represent them for any international tournament, but especially this one. So it's a huge honor, and I'm just excited to get going here. We were a little bit nervous, just waiting around, and then it got to a point where it was taking a bit, so we kind of just laid down and we're just chilling out, and then we got a knock at the door. So felt like I was in there for a lifetime. We kind of both jumped up right away.
Now, Hockey Canada officials left one roster spot open, hoping to fill it with a junior-eligible NHL rookie should teams release them for the tournament. And Plan B is to bring back one of the last cuts to round out that roster. Canada's quest for gold begins Boxing Day against Finland.
Meanwhile, it seems like the International Olympic Committee is doubling down on letting Russian and Belarusian athletes compete at next year's Games in Paris. What's happening there?
That's true, Emily. The head of the International Olympic Committee is once again defending the organization's decision to allow Russian and Belarusian athletes to compete at the 2024 Paris Olympics as neutrals.
Participation of athletes with Russian and Belarusian passports in international competitions works. We see this almost every day in a number of sports. We see it most prominently in tennis, but we see it also in cycling. We see it in ice hockey and in other leagues.
That was IOC boss Thomas Bach last Friday, making it official that Russian and Belarusian athletes would be allowed to compete at next summer's games in Paris. Bach yesterday told the BBC that the organization will double down, saying individual athletes cannot be punished for the acts of their governments. But the athletes will compete as individuals at the games without flags, emblems, or anthems of their countries. The IOC also announced an extra 50 million euros for the refugee Olympic team that will compete in Paris. CBC Sports, of course, will be your home for the Paris Olympics next summer.
Always an interesting debate. Thanks so much for joining us, Claude.
Thank you, Emily.
That was Claude Faig from the CBC Sports Desk. We're coming up on local news time, 7:29 right now, and you're listening to Information Radio 89.3 FM in Winnipeg. I'm Emily Brass, filling in for Marcy Marcusa this week. And still to come in this half hour of the show, why some Winnipeggers are doing this year's Christmas shopping at the thrift stores. It's a growing trend, so we're going to hear more about Thriftmas. And Premier Wab Kinew said his swearing-in ceremony marked the dawn of a new day for this province. Now, 2 months into the job, how's Premier Kinew doing? We'll have our monthly meetup later on in the show. Right now, the local news is next.
This is CBC News. At 7:30, we're at 0 with mostly clear skies over downtown Winnipeg. We're expecting a mild day ahead. It's good to be with you this morning. I'm Matt Humphrey. At the top of the news, a Winnipeg institution is closing down. Nutty Club, which has operated in Western Canada since 1908, will cease operations in late January. Owner Scott Bathgate Limited says the company can no longer operate the business sustainably in a competitive environment. The distinctive striped bags with the famous Nutty Club man logo have been a staple for decades. But the era of Scotch mints and humbugs is coming to a close. The owner says over the coming weeks it'll work through its inventory to fill as many customer orders as possible. Staff in downtown Winnipeg are being given a combination of working notice and offers of severance. Ukraine is dominating the agenda at the European Union summit underway in Brussels. But a new aid package and Ukraine's future membership in the EU are both in jeopardy due to one European leader. Abby Kuathasan has your details.
Hungarian Prime Minister Viktor Orban has gone against the European Union tide before. And so as he arrived in Brussels this morning, he did not mask his stance on Ukraine's hopes to join the bloc, arguing Kyiv has not met 3 of the 7 preconditions set by the EU.
If you haven't fulfilled the preconditions, there is no chance to start to negotiate.
Some argue Orban is holding out for more EU funding. All the other EU states back the start of accession talks. Many see growing the bloc as critical to security. The EU is also looking at providing a new €50 billion package to Kyiv. Orban, a Kremlin-friendly leader, opposes that too. If this 2-day summit fails, they could reconvene in January or March. But time is something Ukraine can't afford to lose. Abby Kuathasan, CBC News, Berlin.
Turning now to Russia and the end-of-year news conference from President Vladimir Putin. It began with a question about Ukraine and how the war is going.
The peace will come when we reach our goals that you have mentioned. And coming back to the goals, they remain unchanged. I will remind you, it means denazification, demilitarization.
Putin says his soldiers are fighting Nazis in Ukraine, a claim denied by Ukraine. Putin also says the leader of Ukraine gave a round of applause to a former SS soldier who participated in the Holocaust, a likely reference to Vladimir Zelensky's trip to Ottawa when the former House of Commons speaker invited a veteran who had fought for the Nazis to the gallery, a mistake that cost the speaker his job. Meanwhile, the holiday season will be different for many Ukrainian Orthodox Christians this year. The official date of Christmas in Ukraine was permanently moved from January 7th to December 25th as a response to Russia's invasion almost 2 years ago. 50-year-old Michelle Kwolachuk is a second-generation Ukrainian Canadian. Kwolachuk says despite knowing about the change, this year she will celebrate Christmas on January 7th.
Those of us who've been celebrating on the old calendar all of our lives, it's a big change, and it's with some mixed feelings that we're going to move ahead and make this change.
The Ukrainian Orthodox Church of Canada says it will celebrate Christmas twice this year to help with the transition from the ancient Julian calendar, which is used by the Russian Orthodox and other Eastern Orthodox churches. In other holiday news, the Salvation Army is reporting a shortage of volunteers this holiday season. Captain Ian Scott is the area commander in Winnipeg. He says the charity has had plenty of people signing up to give toys to children at Toy Mountain, but that's not the case with the largest Salvation Army fundraiser.
The real need for volunteers right now with the Salvation Army is on the kettle campaign. That's sort of where we're missing all of our hours and our volunteer people. Yeah, for whatever reason, it seems to be the lower interest piece right now for folks.
Scott says the campaign has raised only about a quarter of its $300,000 goal, with just a week and a half left to go. Interested volunteers can sign up on the Salvation Army's website for 2-hour shifts at various locations across the city. And finally, True North Sports and Entertainment is enlisting the help needed to sell Winnipeg Jets season tickets. Business people were invited to Canada Life Centre on Tuesday for the launch of a new effort to bolster the club's season ticket base. Attendance to the Jets has been declining since a year before the pandemic. The team is only selling around 80% of the seats at Canada Life. Meanwhile, on the ice, the Jets are playing better than they have in 5 years. And that's your CBC News from Winnipeg.
Thank you, Matt.
Back soon.
And that's CBC's Matt Humphreys, who is joining us from the news desk. And actually, I should say Matt Humphrey. I usually correct people for calling you Humphreys by mistake, and that one just slipped out. I'm sorry, Matt.
Give me time. Just give me time.
Thank you, Matt. You're listening to Information Radio on CBC Radio 1. I'm Emily Brass, filling in for Marcy Marcusa this week. Abby Adiemi is our studio technician. Travis Peterson is producer of our CBC Manitoba YouTube channel, which is live right now. And our show director, Pat Kanuga, joins us with a look at weather and traffic.
Often, when we have warm temperatures, Emily, we have lots of clouds as well.
Somebody who has
Not today, though. We have some very warm temperatures. We're at 0 right now. We will get today to a high temperature of 4 and lots of sunshine. Looking at satellite images right now, we are clear from top of Lake Winnipeg right down to the U.S. border and into North Dakota. Lots of clear skies, lots of sunshine today with that 4. We'll see some wind this morning, south 20 to 25, southwest 15 this afternoon, a pretty not blustery day. Tonight dipping down to a -6, tomorrow mix of sun and clouds, another +1. Into your weekend, Saturday a -1, and Sunday a daytime high of -3. And no real reports of snow in the forecast for the next little while as well. Into next week, we're at -4 and -3s for Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday. Over in Brandon, -2 degrees right now, on the way to a sunny, clear 3. Tonight, dipping down to a -8. It's a pretty straightforward forecast, folks out in Brandon. Tomorrow, mix of sun and cloud and a high of 0. Thompson, you're -3, warm as well. Mainly sunny today, a high of +1. Tonight, dipping down to a -10. And tomorrow, sunshine and a -4. Thompson will get colder next week. By Sunday, I see a daytime high of -13. And more seasonal by the middle of next week at -14s and 13s as well. Temps for you, we're looking at +3s and 4s in all of the following locations. Gimli, where it's -4 right now. Morden Winkler, where it's -5. So is Melita, -5. Dauphin Parkland is 3. And we'll dip 1 to 4 for a daytime high. And Steinbach is -1. Verdun, -5 as well. And at Churchill, warm also 3 on the way. And it'll drop a couple of degrees to a +1, but warm in the north as well. It is 0 in the city of Winnipeg right now. Streets are wet. Do take windshield washer fluid, because you'll be cursing yourself if you have to try and find some snow to throw on your windshield to clean it up as the commute goes on this morning and into the afternoon. 788-3093 is the traffic line to reach me if you see anything. So again, wet streets, wet main drag, side streets could still be a little bit slippery with these temperatures hovering near 0.
Thank you, Pat.
Thank you.
That's CBC's Pat Kanuga. You're listening to Information Radio on CBC Radio 1. I'm Emily Brass. Well, where do you find the perfect gift for the person who has it all? For some Winnipeggers, that answer is easy. The thrift store. With the cost of living going up and environmental concerns top of mind, a new trend is taking over this holiday season, and it's called Thriftmas. And while people might turn to the trend for different reasons, the goal is universal: spread cheer with second-hand and homemade gifts. Winnipegger Sonia Kleinman is one of those shoppers. She's not new to the trend, though. She's been celebrating Thriftmas for decades. Hello.
Good morning, Emily. Thanks for having me.
It's great to see you here. So when did you start celebrating Thriftmas?
Well, I have an interesting background because on my father's side, he's Jewish, and on my mother's side, she's Icelandic and Danish. So as a family, we always celebrated basically everything. And so many years ago, I came across a really interesting magazine called Adbusters. And it really, it was part of the time where I was volunteering with the Quebec Public Interest Research Group and learning about empowered consumption, how to inform yourself as a consumer to make better choices. What materials are used in an item? Who made it? Was indentured labor used? If it's a nonprofit organization, does the board of directors have gender equity on the board? Looking at the big picture of what you're buying and where is it going to go when you're finished with it? And that's what's super important.
And I guess that led to a certain philosophy on, how to choose gifts, right?
That's right. So I'm big on intrinsic value. What is it made of? Is it wood? Is it silk? Is it, vintage Irish linen? I'm not huge on petroleum-based plastics or anything not biodegradable. There's lots of fun things like paper made with seeds you can plant. I love repurposing containers, repurposing packaging. You can make cards out of just about anything. Paper crafts are so much fun for kids and adults alike. And you can make something really beautiful with almost nothing.
And so when you give people gifts like that, how do they react?
They absolutely love them. It's clear that a lot of thought went into it. And as we know, it's not just that you are thinking about the person, but you know them well enough to choose something that is close to their heart. And sometimes you can even do something like make a donation on their behalf or create a card that's an activity. So we're going to the museum or any activity that's appropriate for the person. Especially older people, they love to get out, have something to look forward to. And they'd much rather have that than a polyester scarf. You bought it wherever, So.
And you also mentioned, gifts that are handmade or bought secondhand, which I guess is often really unique. I mean, how important is that as well?
Reusing what already exists in the world is incredibly important, but also what charities are you supporting? Every single registered charity in Canada publishes annual reports. And you don't have to be an accountant to go and read an annual report. It tells you how they spend their money, where they spend it, and how they're governed. And it's important because a lot of people don't realize the charity they're supporting may not align with their values.
Yeah. And so you've been doing this for decades now, but the trend's just now really starting to catch on. Why do you think it took this long?
I think it's so exciting to see younger people getting into not just thrifting, but sourcing, going directly to the source, getting organized and group buying, because that increases your buying power when you don't have a lot. Things like flour. You could have 5 people split a bag of flour instead of each person buying a little bag of flour. Clothing swaps and toy swaps are awesome. You can have a party at the same time, invite your friends over, and any unwanted items at the end you can donate and pass along.
Oh, yeah, that's always fun, the gift swap afterwards. So the trend's now becoming more normalized, but I think there's still some people who might kind of look funny at a secondhand gift. I mean, what would you say about that?
I think that you always have to take everything in the spirit in which it's intended. And you should probably ask yourself, if that person is judging your gift, are they also judging you? Do you even care about their opinion? And, other people's opinions of you are kind of none of your business.
Mm-hmm. And, like you said, it can be really unique. Like, they'll be the only one who got that particular item, likely, right? In your circle.
That's right.
So what has been your best thriftmas find so far?
Oh, my goodness. I just love old fabrics. Older the better. When I find a piece of old linen, I get so excited. And Winnipeg is just like teeming with Irish linen. There's Romanian as well as Eastern European linen. And the older it is, the better it gets. You can make towels, napkins, wrappers. I love doing plant cuttings. So you just take an old bottle or carton, and I do it like an adoption. So this is Linda, your new plant.
Yeah, well, they are, they're a responsibility. So good to remind people of that. Thanks so much for joining us to talk about Thriftmas.
Thanks, Emily. I hope everybody has a wonderful and safe holiday.
Yes, Merry Thriftmas, everyone. Thanks so much. That was Sonia Kleinman. She's a Winnipegger opting to buy gifts secondhand this year.
It has been used to sell cigarettes. It's pushed soda pop. And in 1969, John and Yoko used it above Toronto to sell peace. Celestial Advertising, the art of skywriting, on Under the Influence with Terry O'Reilly. Tomorrow morning at 11:30, 3:30 p.m. in Newfoundland, and on the CBC Listen app.
Oh, holy night, the star is brightly shining. That's all.
That's all you got, Mom?
Yeah.
Hi, it's me, Jim Agapito, and that, of course, is my Yuletide-loving mom, Yolanda. She is my unofficial guide, and heck, the star of my CBC podcast, Recovering Filipino. She taught me all sorts of things about being Filipino, but we never got to tackle one of the biggies, Christmas. Join me for a special Recovering Filipino, the longest Christmas season in the world. You can hear it here on CBC Radio 1 at noon on Boxing Day, or you can find it on the CBC Listen app or wherever you get your podcasts.
Coming up on 7:45, and you're listening to Information Radio on CBC Radio 1, 89.3 FM in Winnipeg, worldwide on our CBC Manitoba YouTube channel, and on the CBC Listen app. I'm Emily Brass. Well, it's been nearly 2 months since Wab Kinew was sworn in as Manitoba's 25th premier. The ceremony marked what he called the dawn of a new day for this province. Kinew said fixing healthcare would be his top priority. The government announced yesterday it had found $123 $123 million in savings. Today, we have our regular monthly interview with Premier Canoe, who joins us live in studio. Good morning.
Good morning and happy holidays.
Happy holidays to you. So let's get into that $123 million in savings that came from canceling the surgical wait times task force, partly from that. We heard some people who were, looking forward to getting surgery outside the province who might be worried now they'll have to wait even longer. What would you say to them?
We're investing in surgeries here in Manitoba. So I think one of the things that didn't make sense about the previous government's plan is how is driving further going to get you seen quicker? And so instead of paying American clinics out of province services, we're investing that here in Manitoba. And by the way, in winding down the task force, $8 million in bureaucratic costs we've saved. The same amount, $8 million, is what we're investing in expanding hospital beds at sites like the Grace, which we all hear day after day really, really need those investments because of the struggles in the emergency room and the struggles that staff are having to do their really, really important work. So we're a couple months in here, and I think we're making good on our promise to reduce the abundance of bureaucracy at the top levels of the healthcare system and returning those resources to the front lines where it actually serves you, the patient.
But wasn't one of the reasons the task force was there, sending people south of the border because you can't get any service any quicker? How are you going to suddenly have quicker surgeries?
The surgical teams at the Concordia Hospital and the Grace are nationally recognized. Some of the best surgeons in the country. The reason why they're not able to perform as many surgeries as they would like is because Stephenson and Pallister, over their time in government, closed the emergency rooms at the Conc and the other sites. And as a result, we don't have the ability to do those more complicated joint surgeries. That contributed significantly to the surgical wait times in our province. So what are we doing with the savings that we started off this interview talking about? We're investing that into more resources at the Conc and the Grace so that they expand capacity. So basically, we're making a choice. Instead of investing in the States, we're investing here in Manitoba. That's going to get you seen more quickly if you're on a wait list for a surgery, but it's also going to invest in our overall public healthcare system here in Manitoba, which is what we need to do because, these challenges in surgeries and emergency rooms, they're not going to get fixed overnight. This is a years-long project that we're embarking on. But I think the first step is to start laying the foundation with some good investments here at home in Manitoba.
So in the meantime, people may have to still wait longer. But moving on with the healthcare plan, part of that was to change the culture of healthcare in Manitoba. You said you would talk to healthcare workers directly, and you did that last week at Grace Hospital.
Yep, first stop.
And you said you got an earful. What have you heard so far?
Well, I think that there are heroic efforts from the people on the front lines, the nurses, the staff who clean the equipment, who bring it to the operating room, the surgeons who are operating there, the ER physicians, the psychiatrists, everyone is doing their best. But what we've seen, and because of the decisions made by the previous government, is that there's just a lot that needs to get cleaned up in the way healthcare is administered. The people on the front lines are doing heroic work. They're doing their best, but we just don't have the right mix of resources in place to meet you, the patient, when you show up at an emergency room, when you get referred for a surgery, when you get referred for an MRI. And so this is going to take a long time to fix, but in the first couple months, our health minister and the rest of our team have done some really important work to bring a mobile MRI into place for northern Manitoba, to add more surgical capacity at the Grace and Concordia, to invest in beds at the hospitals that have emergency rooms, because the waits in the ER are caused by and large by not having beds in the rest of the hospital for people to move out of the ER and then get the care in that other part of the hospital. So we're setting about a plan to make these investments, but we also know that if you look at healthcare in Manitoba, we're spending more money than ever. And yet the outcomes for you, the patient, are getting worse. Wait times are growing, right? So something needs to change. And that's why we talk about culture, because we're dealing with a workforce, the nurses, the staff, the physicians, the healthcare professionals, who by nature are willing to go above and beyond. That's their calling. However, when we disrespect them, when we don't respect their expertise, when we take decision-making power away from them on the front lines, that leads to disillusionment, it leads to burnout, it leads to people leaving the workforce. And so we're going to focus on the culture of healthcare, meaning respecting the front lines, listening to their suggestions, and then implementing those fixes locally.
Mm-hmm. And meanwhile, your government is forecasting a deficit of $1.6 billion. That's more than quadruple the estimate we got back in the spring. And you say the province found that $123 million in savings this fiscal year, but you still don't plan to reduce the deficit. Why not?
We are planning to reduce the deficit. The PC government, Stephenson, on her way out the door, knew this situation was the reality fiscally. And I think we all knew that they were trying to spend money to win back support in the lead up to the election, but I don't think any of us realized the actual price tab that was being run up. It's $1.6 billion. If that administration had been allowed to continue through the rest of the fiscal year, the deficit would be much higher than what it is today. So we've found some savings right now to stop the deficit from increasing. We've found further savings to be able to invest in things like healthcare, like to be able to cut the provincial fuel tax to save you money after the holidays. And the number that was shared yesterday is a number up to December 1st, because these are basically audited books that are signed off on by the technical experts in government. I can tell you that as we stand here today, the number is better. So we continue to do our work in government to be fiscally responsible, but also to have a balanced approach. Balance meaning, yes, we're going to wrangle with the deficit that we inherited from the previous government, but we're also going to invest in services like healthcare. And of course, we're going to focus on making investments that grow the economy. Mm-hmm. So we have to focus on all three of those things together to have the right mix and balanced approach.
Well, and I guess like what you're saying is by finding those savings, it keeps the deficit from growing any further. But I mean, that's a big number, $1.6 billion. I mean, what kind of tax hikes might we see in light of this deficit and all the promises, including cutting the gas tax for 6 months starting in January?
Well, we are making good on our election promises. You know, when I go to Home Depot or Walmart and people, stop and share some encouraging words, one of the things that they often say is that we think you're going to keep your promises. And that matters to people. And so we're less than 100 days in to government, and we are investing in the hospitals with emergency rooms. We're investing in healthcare to bring it closer to you, the patient, where you live. And we're also honoring our commitment to cut the provincial fuel tax to save you money after the holidays. So provincial government can't do everything, but by restoring fiscal responsibility and by making targeted investments in the cost of living and in healthcare, I think we're taking some really, really good steps that are starting to move things into a more positive direction for the province of Manitoba.
Mm-hmm. But won't that take a tax hike at some point? I mean, that's a lot of money to make up for.
This is PC messaging, because they were never willing to make the tough decisions. And I think our team is going to make a balanced approach a reality here in Manitoba. We're going to be fiscally responsible, which means doing a lot of internal work, tightening the belts within government and being responsible. We're going to make the investments in healthcare and in the economy. And then we're going to make some targeted investments in future job-creating opportunities that I think are going to grow more opportunity for the good people of this province.
Okay. Meanwhile, the opposition has accused your government of inflating that deficit number to make them look bad. And you've mentioned it a few times. Well, let's hear from finance critic Abi Khan from yesterday.
If the deficit was what they claim it to be, why not apply that $125 million to the deficit? They want to talk about holding the line. Well, you're not holding the line if you're looking to move money to pay for $3 billion in promises.
How would you respond to the finance critic?
He and Heather Stephenson created this $1.6 billion deficit. They have zero credibility in terms of trying to criticize us for this. Yesterday, in advance of the press conference we held, we had a technical briefing where we invited every journalist, any columnist, anyone into the building to sit down, not with the politicians, but with the finance department and Treasury Board staff and ask any question you want. Poke and prod at these numbers. These are real numbers. For folks who watch this issue carefully, I will say this. Look at the Manitoba provincial debt to GDP ratio. It has deteriorated as a result of this being a real deficit number. This is not inflated. This is a number that we walked into when we formed government. Now, for us, we have to have a balanced approach, which does mean wrangling with this deficit number left to us by the PCs, but we still have to move ahead with investing in healthcare. This is the number one priority for people in Manitoba. And of course, in the long run, one of the important solutions is going to be to grow the economy. So we still have to make those necessary investments in terms of creating a brighter future for tomorrow.
And another priority for some people is homelessness in Manitoba. We know 2 people died earlier this week in a tent in Point Douglas. And Housing, Addictions and Homelessness Minister Bernadette Smith says she doesn't want to open any more shelters. She says they're a Band-Aid fix. So what solutions are you proposing and when?
It's really sad when we hear people losing their lives in this kind of way. I think all of us, just on the level of humanity, when we drive by bus shacks or we see encampments, which are outside downtown Winnipeg today, I would add. This is in South Pembina, West Winnipeg, Brandon, major issues in Thompson, other parts of the province that haven't seen this before. I would say that this is one of the top priorities that I've heard from Manitobans from all walks of life. And at the end of the day, the goal is I want you to come downtown to a hockey game, to a concert, to get a bite to eat, and feel proud of our downtown, to feel proud of Thompson's downtown, proud of Brandon's downtown. The way that we do that is by bringing everyone together to buy into one plan around homelessness and to remove the barriers and the silos that exist. And so that's the work that we're in the early days of. But the good news is we have a really good working relationship with the mayor of the city of Winnipeg and other municipal leaders across the province. Good relationship with the federal government, very strong relationship with the business community who care passionately about this issue. And of course, good relationships with the not-for-profit sector. So we're going to stand up housing, but the provincial government cannot stand up new social housing quick enough to deal with the humanitarian crisis we see on the streets. So we're also going to have to look at the existing housing stock. We're going to have to work with landlords. We're going to have to work with property owners, with municipal governments, with the feds to figure out how can we get people off of the streets and out of bus shacks and into housing situations as quickly as possible, and then to ensure that they have the wraparound supports, addictions, mental health, hopefully also pre-employment and job programs for some, so that they can be successful once they do move into that housing unit. And this, again, is going to be a long-term approach, but it's something that we've started on right now.
All right, so we just have a little bit of 25 seconds left, and here's the hardest hitting question of all. Do you have any holiday plans?
You know, I love the holiday season, the generosity that we all get to celebrate, the visiting, the food. And so I'm very much looking forward to spending a lot of good time with our friends and family, and of course to be on the rink skating with our kids.
We'll have a great holiday season,
Happy
Premier.
holidays to you.
That was Premier Wab Kinew. He was joining us in studio. We're coming up on time for World Report. Still to come in the next hour of the show, Drivers Wanted. We head to the cheer board to see the thousands of hampers that are ready to ship and hear about their need for you to help. And how did a hit Christmas film featuring a child star help revive demand for a Christmas song by a former child star? We'll find out all that ahead on Information Radio here on CBC Radio 1, 89.3 FM in Winnipeg. I'm Emily Brass. You can also check us out on the CBC Manitoba YouTube page and on the CBC Listen app. World Report is coming up next.
On Cue with Tom Power.
Kurt Russell is one of the biggest action stars of the 80s and 90s.
Call me Snake.
And his son Wyatt is following in his footsteps.
I understand that!
They'll both be here to tell you about working together and how their background in pro sports helped them become better actors. That's coming up on Cue, followed by Commotion with Elamine Abdelmahmoud on CBC Radio 1, the CBC Listen app, and everywhere you get your podcasts.
News is next. Coming up in half an hour, it's The Current with Matt Galloway.
Levi Rosman is known as the internet's chess teacher, and he's trying to change the game's nerdy image for his 4 million YouTube fans. Levi Rosman on the boom in chess and how to bring more people to the game, coming up on The Current.
This is World Report. Good morning from CBC News. I'm Marcia Young. The head of the UN's aid agency in Gaza says hunger has now become a major threat to the displaced Palestinians. Philippe Lazzarini says they are being forced to take desperate measures.
And this is also something completely new. People are stopping aid trucks, taking the food and eating it right away. And this is how desperate and hungry they are.
The plight of civilians in Gaza is expected to be one of the issues raised by Jake Sullivan as he meets Israeli leadership. The U.S. National Security Advisor is in Tel Aviv on a 2-day visit. One top U.S. official says these are going to be extremely serious conversations. My co-host John Northcott joins me now with more. And John, what is Jake Sullivan trying to do?
Marcia, amid rising tensions between the U.S. president and the Israeli prime minister, Jake Sullivan is trying to send a message while striking a diplomatic balance. He'll be meeting with Benjamin Netanyahu and his war cabinet. Sullivan's message coming from the U.S. president that Israel has to be more precise as it continues its intense bombing of Gaza. Joe Biden has described that bombing as, in his words, indiscriminate, with half of the air-to-ground attacks carried out so far described as unguided. The U.S. wants Israel to be more, quote, surgical in its strikes. Israel, on the other hand, insists its intent has always been to limit civilian casualties. As the war against Hamas continues, 9 Israeli soldiers were killed in an ambush in northern Gaza. Gazan health officials are now putting the number of Palestinian dead at more than 18,000.
Israel was not Sullivan's first stop in the Middle East. What can you tell us about his visit to Saudi Arabia?
He met with Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman, MBS as he's known. The Saudis could potentially play a key role in the longer-term peace in the region, including a possible 2-state solution. The U.S. also worried about more immediate concerns, including security in the region. This as attacks continue against international shipping by Houthi rebels based in Yemen.
Thank you, John.
Thanks, Marcia.
The CBC's John Northcott in Toronto. Ukraine is at the top of the agenda for European Union leaders. Their final summit of the year has started in Brussels. Ukraine's multi-billion-dollar aid package and EU membership aspirations are on the line. Members need to unanimously agree to add a new member. But as Abby Kodawson reports, one country still will not budge.
Hungarian Prime Minister Viktor Orban has gone against the European Union tide before. And so as he arrived in Brussels this morning, he did not mask his stance on Ukraine's hopes to join the bloc, arguing Kyiv has not met 3 of the 7 preconditions set by the EU.
In my estimation, even more, but even 3 is enough to say that, guys, if you haven't fulfilled the preconditions, there is no chance to start to negotiate.
Some argue Orban is holding out for more EU funding. Others point out he's furious about what he calls poor treatment of the Hungarian minority in Ukraine.
Hungary does not connect any Hungarian issue to any Ukrainian or other issue. It's not our style.
All the other EU states back the start of accession talks. Many see growing the bloc as critical to security. Recent cajoling by French President Emmanuel Macron, European Council President Charles Michel, and even Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky could not change Orban's mind.
It's definitely a bad signal.
Estonian Prime Minister Kaja Kallas acknowledged membership talks are rarely quick.
We will try again, so try to convince, try to negotiate, and so not ready to give up yet.
The EU is also looking at providing a new €50 billion package to Kyiv. Orban, a Kremlin-friendly leader, opposes that too. If this 2-day summit fails, they could reconvene in January or March. But time is something Ukraine can't afford to lose. Abby Kodawson, CBC News, Berlin.
Russian President Vladimir Putin says he has no intention of stopping the war in Ukraine anytime soon. Putin is holding his end-of-year news conference this morning. Here's part of what he said with English translation.
The peace will come when we reach our goals that you have mentioned, and coming back to the goals, they remain unchanged. I will remind you, it means denazification, demilitarization of Ukraine and its neutral status.
The neutral status he mentioned refers to Ukraine not joining NATO, and the denazification refers to Russian allegations that Kyiv is heavily influenced by radical nationalist and neo-Nazi groups. Putin went on to say He's hoping for an agreement for a possible prisoner swap with the United States. It would involve Canadian-born former U.S. Marine Paul Whelan and Wall Street Journal reporter Evan Gershkovich. A Russian court ruled earlier today Gershkovich must remain in jail until January 30 for his pretrial detention. Gershkovich was arrested last March on charges of espionage. He denies the charges. Finland has reopened parts of its long border with Russia. Late last month, Finland shut down its roads connecting the two. Asylum seekers from various countries had begun crossing the Finnish-Russian border. Finland alleges that in November, Russia orchestrated the arrival of about 900 people from Africa and the Middle East. The Nordic nation says it was in retaliation for its decision to increase defense cooperation with the U.S. and its decision to join NATO. The Kremlin denies that allegation. The arrivals stopped when Finland shut the border. A First Nation in eastern Ontario has declared a state of emergency. Pikwakanagan is struggling to cope with an opioid crisis. The community is about 150 kilometers west of Ottawa. As Nicole Williams reports, officials say the drug-related deaths there are higher than ever this year.
They are my people. And when they hurt, I hurt.
Michael Dustin Commando is seeing firsthand what opioid addiction is doing to his community. As a member of the Algonquins of Pikwakanagan First Nation, of just 500 people located in the Ottawa Valley, he says everyone knows each other and are connected to the people who've died from overdosing, adding to the devastation.
I do have family that has drug addictions, and I see no change of them getting better.
Officials say the frequency of overdoses and deaths is growing. Before 2020, there were 5 drug-related deaths on average per year. This year, 12 people have died. Those who work at the Pikwakanagan Health Centre say they're responding to at least 3 overdoses a week. Community members have been calling for urgent action, and council responded by declaring a state of emergency in November. Greg Sarzan is chief.
And it's reached a point where the community has said, well, enough is enough. We need to do something about this.
In declaring a state of emergency, Pikwakanagan is able to access government funding for addictions programming and partnerships with provincial and federal agencies to develop an action plan, as well as more police. Sarzan says the state of emergency will remain in place for as long as necessary. Nicole Williams, CBC News, Pikwakanagan First Nation, Ontario.
Residents of 2 small Quebec towns are preparing to spend the holidays away from home. Earlier this month, more than 2,000 people had to leave their communities. A nearby dike was at risk of bursting. As Sarah Levitt tells us, it is still not clear when the evacuees will be able to return.
We've put everything we have in this house. My husband built it himself.
Sitting in her hotel room, Arlene Desmarais-Ouellette can't help but think of the worst-case scenario. She and her husband have been away from home for almost 2 weeks, forced out by an emergency preventative evacuation. An alert was sent out to residents on December 3rd after a nearby dike showed signs of erosion following a routine inspection.
There's a lot of uncertainty, and I think sometimes they say no news is good news. I'm not sure about that one this time.
The Morier Dike holds back the Kiamika Reservoir filled with billions of liters of water. The towns of Lac des Écourses and Chute Saint-Philippe were immediately evacuated. Martin Ferland is an engineer specializing in dikes with Environment Quebec.
Depuis 2 semaines, là, on a commencé à abaisser.
He says since the inspection, they've been working non-stop to fix the issue. Authorities say the more than 2,000 residents won't be back home before at least Sunday, but
I'm not optimistic. I'm hopeful, but I'm not optimistic.
Many are certain it will be longer, and they'll spend the holidays as evacuees. Sarah Levitt, CBC News, Lac des Écourses, Quebec.
And that is the latest national and international news from World Report. News anytime at cbcnews.ca. I'm Marcia Young.
Good morning, Manitoba. You're listening to Information Radio on CBC Radio 1, 89.3 FM in Winnipeg, worldwide on our CBC Manitoba YouTube channel and on the CBC Listen app. I'm Emily Brass, filling in this week for Marcy Marcusa. Here's what's still to come on the show. How did a hit Christmas film featuring a child star help revive demand for a Christmas song by a former child star? We'll find out all about that ahead with Julie Dupre. But first, the boxes are being taped up, the hampers are ready, and now the Christmas cheer board needs more drivers. We'll take you to its warehouse on Century Street in Winnipeg at 8:15. All that and more still to come on Information Radio. Eleven minutes after 8 o'clock, time for news headlines with Matt Humphrey.
Good morning. The life of a Winnipeg institution is coming to a close. Owners at Nutty Club say the candy maker is winding down operations. They say national competition is now forcing their hand. We'll hear more about that at the bottom of the hour. And if you're feeling the holiday cheer right now, the Salvation Army is hoping you might volunteer this season. The organization's Kettle campaign has only raised about a quarter of its goal, with only a week and a half to go. So far, it's looking for more volunteers to ring collection bells. We'll hear more about that at 8:30 as well.
Thank you, Matt.
Back soon.
That's CBC's Matt Humphrey from the CBC Manitoba News Desk. And right now, our show director, Pat Kanuga, is here with a look at the traffic.
Boy, it's been pretty uneventful, Emily.
Must be that good conditions on the road you've been talking about.
With the warm weather, we'll use a baseball terminology here, but are we pitching a no-hitter? Haven't heard about any reports of stalls, crashes, or delays. If there is something out there, do give me a call. We're on the air till 8:37 here in Information Radio, 788-3093. And I'll sound like a broken record, to use an old term. Windshield washer fluid, or at least a bottle of water, take with you, because you don't want to be the person. I have been this person where you have to stop and throw some snow on your front windshield to clean it, but there's no real snow out there. And if there is, it's dirty snow. Just look in front of us here in Studio 15, Emily. It's dirty, filthy snow.
It would make it worse.
Yeah, it would. So just do know that it's very sloppy out there as we're hovering around zero, and it's a little bit messy out there on the streets of Winnipeg. With a look at today's Winnipeg forecast, here is Abby Adiemi.
Thanks, Pat. As we start the day, Winnipeg is waking up to a clear sky, as with the wind coming from the southwest. Currently at the Forks, we're sitting at -1. Expect a sunny day ahead with the winds shifting and then becoming lighter around the noon period, and plenty of sunshine in the cards that I've mentioned earlier. Today, we're looking at a high of +4. And talking about tonight, it's going to be clear skies in store for you, although, according to John Sutter's forecast, the clouds may make an appearance later as we approach the midnight period. But the winds will be lighter, and the temperature will drop to a low of -6. Sunrise would be at 8:19 a.m. and sunset at 4:27 p.m. Currently in Winnipeg, we are at -1.
Coming up on 8:15, and you're listening to Information Radio on CBC Radio 1, 89.3 FM in Winnipeg. I'm Emily Brass. Well, as we approach the middle of December, it's crunch time for the Christmas Cheer Board of Winnipeg. Hundreds of volunteers have been at it for over a month now, packing hampers with food and toys and getting them ready to deliver to those in need. Now, deliver is the critical part right now. Our Pat Kanuga went to the Cheer Board headquarters at 895 Century Street, and he found thousands of boxes organized by neighborhoods, and among them was the charity's executive director.
Shauna Bell, there are people lined up here at the Christmas Cheerboard headquarters, and tell me what's going on here right now.
So we've got hamper packing going on in the background here. It's one of the local schools in the city. They've come in to pack hampers for the morning. They come in with about 20 to 25 students, help us out getting out, I believe these are 2-3 family size, so that's about 500 hampers that are going out the door this afternoon, or this morning rather.
Now the big question, are they getting out the door? Because you guys need drivers at this time of year.
We do. So as no one can see this behind you, Pat, but there are thousands of hampers just waiting to go out the door. We desperately need drivers. We've got over 6,000 hampers that have to be out and in people's hands by the 24th, and we're very hopeful that drivers will come and see us. It's a very simple process to deliver hampers for us. Come in, show us your license. We're going to take you to an area of the city that works for you. We're going to assign you about 4 to 5 hampers, and those are usually within 2 to 3 city blocks of one another. It's a pretty quick process. It'll last you about an hour tops, and if you can get those delivered, you can come back and help us out with some more if you choose to do so.
Tell me about some of these drivers. You see some coming back year after year, I understand.
We have some amazing volunteer drivers who come back every single year to help us out. Some organizations will send some of their staff for a full day to help. So we've got Blue Cross as one example, and then Labatt's, and they've come in with some volunteer drivers. They work for about 6 to 8 hours in the day to make sure that we get hampers out. So it's wonderful.
So the company says this is your job today, is to deliver hampers.
If somebody wants to and the company is willing to part with their staff for the day or the afternoon even, they can come on down and we will help them help us.
So you have those sorts of drivers, but then you have people who come out, ones who've been coming out for years that you recognize, and what do they tell you about why they do it?
You know, everybody comes here for 2 reasons. One is there's an incredible sense of community with our volunteers. Some of them have been here 20 years, going all the way to about 45 years. It's amazing. And they come because it's community, but they also come because they see the good that it does within this community and the people that we help. And yes, it's one time a year, but it's one time a year when we can make an incredible difference in someone's life.
So it's coming down to crunch time, even though we're just coming up to the middle of December. But what's your feeling right now as far as will we get these hampers out?
I believe in the power of the people of Winnipeg, and every year they never cease to amaze me. We see the best in folks coming through our doors, and I know that looking at last year when we put the call out for folks to come help, we had a lineup that lasted over 2 hours, and that's an amazing thing for us, but we don't want people waiting that long, so we're hopefully going to help people a little more efficiently this year. But I do believe that with the help of this community, with the help of the people of Winnipeg, we're going to successfully deliver these hampers this year.
We've talked about the need for drivers. Let's talk about the need for hampers. Certainly, as we spoke with you weeks ago on Information Radio, you opened the phone lines earliest ever, and you were besieged with demand. Tell us about that.
Yeah, it's been very, very busy nonstop since November 3rd when we opened our phone lines. We're right now just creeping up on the 17,000 mark for hamper applications. That's high. Last year we hit 18,313, so we're expecting to see well over 19,000 this year. The numbers have been consistent. We know where they're coming from for the most part for some of the larger groups, because we work with over 50 social agencies here in the city to ensure people are supported. I have no doubt that we're going to exceed that 19,000 this year.
You've been doing this for a long time as a volunteer, a few years as the big boss now. When you see this kind of demand, how does that make you feel as far as just seeing what the need that is out there?
It's hard. We see folks coming through the door, and there's so many people that need us so very much. We can only help with this little bit to ease some of the burden and some of the stress of the holidays. That's not a year-round opportunity, which I really wish we could be better suited to do. But we know that there are other organizations that are out there to help, but just the need is so very great. And I don't see that easing up over the next year. When you look at the news and hear all the reports about inflation and the costs of things going up, I'm just grateful that we're able to help out as much as we can, but it is a daunting task.
And what is the best way for Winnipeggers and Manitobans to help?
I think right now, given where we are in the season, that if we can get folks donations, cash donations always help. So they're more than welcome to. They can e-transfer us. They can visit our website at christmascheerboard.ca. We have a number of different options that they can help support us in a financial way. But really, the drivers, anybody who wants to come out and drive, I welcome them to come through the doors. I'll be at the doors to greet them myself.
Good luck with everything. Thank you for what you do for Winnipeg and all the people for the years you've put in, and good luck over the next few days here. And yeah, it's coming down to crunch time, and it is a busy place here.
It's very busy. Thanks so much, Pat. This is fantastic. Merry Christmas.
Merry Christmas.
That's Shauna Bell, Executive Director of the Christmas Cheer Board, speaking with Pat. On the south side of the warehouse, there was a steady stream of drivers helping load those hampers, and one of them was Lori Folds.
Tell me, you are here at Christmas Cheer Board headquarters to do some driving. What brought you down here?
You know what, something I've always talked about doing every year and never got around to it, and this year thought, let's make that effort and come out and do it.
So you're a first-timer?
I am.
And what are you anticipating as you get your vehicle loaded right away and then going out and delivering these hampers?
Oh, there's a lot here. There's definitely a lot to be delivered, for sure. So hopefully people are home and available and we're able to drop them off.
You said you've thought about doing it for a while. What was the thing that put thoughts into action this year for you?
Definitely my daughter's job gave her a day off to volunteer, and so that really motivated us to get out and do it. And like I say, this is something I've always talked about doing, so thought we'd pick this as the choice this year.
And have you heard some of the need this year is unprecedented? What goes through your mind when you hear that and you're here today?
Yeah, well, I believe it because everything just is so expensive. So compared to past years, I'm sure it is worse. And you can see by the amount of things that need to be delivered here that there definitely is a huge need for it.
Any idea how many hampers you're getting today?
We're taking 6 to start, and then we'll deliver those and come back.
At the end of the day, what do you think will be going through your mind?
Well, probably just gratitude. It's nice to help people.
And the sense of community here is, if you've never had it before about Winnipeg, when you come here, it certainly hits home, doesn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. It's nice to see the schools here that are putting hampers together and helping out. That's great.
Thanks for your time today, and thanks for doing this.
No problem. Thanks a lot.
That was our own Pat Kanuga speaking with Lori Folds, who was delivering hampers yesterday for the first time. Now, the warehouse for the Christmas Cheer Board is at 895 Century Street. And if you want to help, you can just show up to deliver some hampers. For more information, go to their website, christmascheerboard.ca. And joining us now in the studio is Pat Kanuga, who you just heard on tape. What's up, Pat?
I just wanted to say, if you haven't been to the cheer board before, if you haven't volunteered, I've had a close relationship with them for decades now. Shauna Bell, the people there, doing unbelievable work. If you're thinking about it, when I went down there yesterday, it was just amazing to see the hustle and bustle of the place, and people are smiling. They had 25 school kids come in to pack boxes, and there's just a steady stream of vehicles coming and getting loaded with the different hampers. Someone would take about 5-6 hampers and go around a certain neighborhood. So if you've ever thought about doing it, maybe check it out this year. I'm hoping to get to deliver a few hampers this year. I've done it in the past with some colleagues before, and it's quite a rewarding thing to do. So a big thank you to all the volunteers and all the folks who are helping out with the Christmas Cheer Board this year.
Pretty inspiring too, because it sounds like something that's fun to do with some friends, and get into the spirit of the holidays.
Do that. Yep,
the true
exactly
spirit.
It.
Yes.
Yep.
All right. Thanks so much, Pat.
Christmas is a time for magic.
The talking snowman. Well, you don't surprise me anymore.
For tradition.
One just has to have a present from Santa. You do it, Arthur.
And a time for love.
Be kind. And if you really want to see what people are, all you have to do is look.
Enjoy holiday favorites all Christmas Day on CBC and CBC Gem.
23 minutes after 8 o'clock, and it's -1 at the Forks in Winnipeg, going up to a high of +4 today. Kind of breezy this morning, but that's going to ease off in the afternoon with that high of +4. I'm Emily Brass, filling in this week for Marcy Marcusa. As we head deeper into December, you've likely noticed more Christmas trees around. Maybe you've even attended a holiday party or two where there was some rockin' happening around that said tree. CBC radio producer Julie Dupre has been bringing us stories behind some newer Christmas classics, and she's kicking it a bit more old school this week with a song that's been given a new lease on life this year with a music video. Here's Julie.
Rockin' Around the Christmas Tree was first released in 1958. It was performed by then 13-year-old Brenda Lee. That may seem young, and it is, but by then, Brenda Lee already had a few years under her belt in the professional music world. She started her singing career at age 6. She made her first recordings and even performed at the Grand Ole Opry when she was just 12. Her first release in 1956 was a cover of Jambalaya. Interestingly, the record label Decca decided to make her younger than she actually was and listed her as Little Brenda Lee, 9 years old. And how's this for foreshadowing? I'm gonna lasso Santa Claus. Her second single featured 2 novelty Christmas tunes, I'm Gonna Lasso Santa Claus and Christy Christmas. Throughout her career, in addition to that Christmas EP, Brenda Lee would release 3 full Christmas albums. Merry Christmas from Brenda Lee in 1964, A Brenda Lee Christmas in 1991, and Jingle Bell Rock in 1993. While Rockin' Around the Christmas Tree is inextricably linked to Brenda Lee, she was not the song's writer. That title belongs to the man who also penned Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer, A Holly Jolly Christmas, Silver and Gold, and I Heard the Bells on Christmas Day. That man's name is Johnny Christmas. Kidding, it's Johnny Marks. But with that track record, it wouldn't be all that surprising. The tune has been featured in several Christmas films, but none had quite the impact as a certain 1990 festive flick.
I made my family disappear.
Here's how Brenda Lee described the Home Alone effect to Entertainment Tonight in 2023.
I remember when I got the call from one of my friends and they said, Brenda, there's a new movie out. It's called Home Alone and your song's all over it. So I went and sit and I went, oh Lord. And that's really the catalyst, I think, that pushed it to the forefront.
While Rockin' failed to make much of a dent on the charts when it was first released, in 2023 it was certified 5 times platinum by the Recording Industry Association of America. To mark that accomplishment and to celebrate the song's 65th anniversary, Brenda Lee recruited some high-profile friends, namely Tanya Tucker and Trisha Yearwood, and recorded a music video. It features the 78-year-old dancing and lip-syncing along with the recording of her 13-year-old self. And in case you've forgotten, here's what that sounds like. For CBC Radio, I'm Julie Dupre.
Rocking around the Christmas tree at the Christmas party hop. Mistletoe hung where you can see every couple tries to stop. Rocking around the Christmas tree, let the Christmas spirit ring. Later we'll have some pumpkin pie and we'll do some caroling. You will get a sentimental feeling when you hear voices singing, let's be jolly, deck the halls with boughs of holly. Rocking around the Christmas tree, have a happy holiday. Everyone dancing merrily in the new old-fashioned way. Christmas tree, have a happy holiday. Everyone dancing merrily in the new old-fashioned way.
That was Brenda Lee, and you might have heard her earlier this week with Tom Power on Q. If you missed it, you can still hear the podcast version. That's Q with Tom Power, and you can find it wherever you get your podcasts. Coming up on Local News Time, I'm Emily Brass, filling in this week for Marcy Marcusa. It is currently, let's refresh and be sure, -1 at the Forks in Winnipeg, and it's going up to a high of +4. The news is next.
This is CBC News. As Emily said, at 8:30, we're at -1 with mostly clear skies over downtown Winnipeg. Good morning. I'm Matt Humphrey. At the top of the news, the end of an era. Scott Bathgate Limited, which owns Nutty Club Candies, is closing down. Nutty Club Candies, such as Scotch Mints, Humbugs, and its red pearled peanuts, have been a staple in corner stores since the 1930s. The iconic red and white Nutty Club man has been painted on the side of a building in downtown Winnipeg for decades. The company president says the competitive international environment has evolved to where it can no longer sustainably operate. Christian Cassidy is a Winnipeg historian. He says it's sad to see another classic Winnipeg brand disappear.
Every time we lose one, it's losing part of that history we had of when, we were the gateway to Western Canada, right? And it was products produced here, whether it be overalls or tractors or candies that were produced in Winnipeg that were sold through to Western Canada.
The company says it'll work through its existing inventory to fill orders, but will close for good by the end of January. It appears the United States is becoming increasingly concerned about the Israeli offensive in Gaza. U.S. National Security Advisor Jake Sullivan is in Israel for talks with the Israeli War Cabinet.
He's going to talk to them about progress on the battlefield, how it's going. He's going to talk to them about reductions in civilian harm. He's going to talk to them about trying to get another pause in place so that we can get more hostages out. He's going to talk to them about the need to get humanitarian assistance, keep that flowing.
That's White House spokesperson John Kirby outlining Sullivan's agenda for his two-day visit. Earlier this week, U.S. President Joe Biden suggested global support for Israel is weakening due to what he calls the indiscriminate bombing of Gaza. The Hamas-run health ministry reported overnight at least 19 people have been killed in the latest round of Israeli airstrikes. Russian President Vladimir Putin is taking part in his annual State of Russia news conference. It's a made-for-TV event with the war in Ukraine the main focus of Putin's message. Briar Stewart has your details.
As Vladimir Putin sat down for a news conference carried live by all of the main Russian television channels, it was clearly the type of event he relishes, one where he's front and center, and it's designed to make him look like a powerful, confident leader. Among the live studio audience were some journalists who were called on individually, while organizers said more than 2 million questions were submitted by Russians ahead of time. Some of those who wanted to question the president, the wives of soldiers who've been mobilized. On social media, they've been demanding that their men be returned. According to Western officials, more than 300,000 Russian fighters have been killed or wounded since the start of the full-scale invasion. Today, Putin said Russia's plans for Ukraine haven't changed. And it doesn't appear to be the end of Putin's time in power. He will run and most certainly win in the election this spring and secure another 6 years as president. Briar Stewart, CBC News, London.
Meanwhile, Ukrainians in Manitoba will have 2 opportunities to celebrate Christmas this year. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky signed a law moving his country's official Christmas Day to December 25th instead of January 7th. It's part of abandoning what's seen as Russian heritage after Putin's invasion almost 2 years ago. Some churches in Canada are now following suit. Holy Trinity Ukrainian Orthodox Cathedral in Winnipeg will hold services on December 25th. Father Eugene Maximuk wants to make the transition as easy easy as possible for families.
So we will be celebrating on the 6th and the 7th as well, just as a way to allow those families that are still, very much would like to celebrate at least one more Christmas on the Julian calendar to have the opportunity to do so.
The Julian calendar is observed by the Russian Orthodox Church and some other Eastern Orthodox churches. Maximuke says Holy Trinity will switch to the Gregorian calendar in February of next year. And it's been a rough start to the holiday season for the Salvation Army. The charity's annual Kettle campaign is hoping to raise $300,000 in Winnipeg, but with a week and a half to go, they're only at a quarter of that. Area Commander Captain Ian Scott says they don't have enough volunteers signing up to ring the bells.
Because when there's no one there, people don't see them. And so even though the kettle stand may be there, if you don't have a person, you lose that interaction and you lose that relationship piece with the community, and people don't donate to an empty stand.
The Kettle campaign is the Salvation Army's main fundraiser for the year. Scott says volunteers can sign up online for 2-hour shifts at whichever location is most convenient for them. And that's your CBC News from Winnipeg.
Thanks so much, Matt.
Thank you for the morning.
Have a great day.
Back soon.
And that was Matt Humphrey from the CBC News Desk. And joining me now is Pat Kanuga with one last look at the weather.
A last look, yes, we are at a -1. We have that 8 o'clock dip where we often dip by a degree, but we're going to rebound and get to a 4 today. Lots and lots of sunshine. We have clear skies for the bottom 2/3 of the province, from the top of Lake Winnipeg all the way down to the U.S. border. So a good looking day. That -4 degrees, or that +4, I should say, will make things messy out there. I'll mention Brandon here quickly, -3 as well. Sunshine today and a high of +3. So we're going to rise about 6 degrees in Brandon. And tonight, Brandon will see a low of -8, and tomorrow a high of 0. And Thompson, you're -3. You are sunny as well, on the way to a +1. We have temperatures of 3 and 4 throughout most of the province, even up in Churchill, where it's been 3 this morning. You'll round out just above 0 to +1, but some warm temperatures out there today. Enjoy your Thursday, everyone, on this very sunny day.
Thank you so much,
Thank
Pat.
you.
That's our show director, Pat Kanuga. Also with us, our studio technician, Abby Adeyemi, and our CBC Manitoba YouTube channel producer, Travis Peterson. I'm Emily Brass, filling in for Marcy Marcusa this week. Coming up next is The Current, and we'll hear from Levy Rosman. He's known as the internet's chess teacher, and he's trying to change the game's sometimes nerdy image for his 4 million YouTube fans. He talks with Matt Galloway about the boom in chess and how to bring more people to the game. That's coming up on The Current, which is up next. Hope you have a fantastic day out there. Tomorrow's Friday. Have a good one.